sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. My special guest tonight, you've seen him here before. His name is Greg Marcel Dixon, and he is running for Congress against Jim Clyburn. And Greg Marcel Dixon is running as an independent. Welcome back, Marcel. Oh, I think you're muted.
Hey, Sabrina. Thank you for having me.
So, Marcel, I want to start off with the Joe Biden presidential debate. I want to get your take on that. Obviously, I think you and I both have been critical about Joe Biden's performance even before this debate. But I think it was that exposure of him on the debate stage that really gave a lot of people who may not have been paying attention to politics just yet. I think it gave a lot of people pause. How do you feel about Joe Biden's experience during that debate? And how do you feel about the way that media and politicians are trying to run cover for him?
Well, first, let me just clarify something. I'm actually running third party with the United Citizens Party here in South Carolina. And as far as the debate goes, my expectations were very low. But my goodness, even my expectations were subseeded, I should say. So I feel like Trump demolished Biden, and I'm not necessarily a fan of either. But Biden definitely did not perform well at all. And I've seen polls where people are questioning whether he even has the mental capacity or even the health to serve another term. So they definitely did not do themselves any favors with that debate performance. And the thing is, I believe they are the ones that requested the debate or that were asking for it. I'm thinking they're regretting that now.
I think so, too. And I also want to get your opinion about the fact that obviously third party and independent candidates were not a part of this debate. I couldn't even stream this debate because CNN owned exclusive rights to it, which is unusual. In the past, I've been able to stream those debates. But obviously, the American people did not get to see any other options on that stage, even though there are. You're in South Carolina. What have people said in South Carolina? And are they aware that there are other candidates that are running?
So this is going to not surprise you at all. We have had a progressive party in South Carolina that has wanted to have ballot access. It's not the Republican Party that has been obstructing their privileges. It is the Democratic Party. And with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm not a fan of him either. If I had to choose between the three, I would choose Trump. I'm being very honest. I know your viewers may not like that, but that's just the God's honest truth. But with this debate, Trump did not mind, if you have read the articles, Trump did not mind RFK Jr. participating in the debate. It was the Democrats that objected to it. So the party that's supposed to be the protectors of democracy have been acting in ways that are absolutely diametrically opposed to what should be democratic norms. And like I said, I'm not a fan of RFK Jr. at all. I absolutely despise Biden. If I had to choose the lesser of the three evils, I would say Trump. But I feel that RFK Jr. and the American people, period, have a right to know what options are out there and to hear each candidate make their case. And to me, they were robbed of it. Now, I know RFK Jr. did his own debate, but to me, it should have been on the general debate stage that was publicly televised. And on the matter of the media, Trump has always said the media is the enemy of the American people. And, you know, as Black Americans, freedmen in this country, the media has never been friends of ours. I'm not sure why that would offend us. But the media has not been making a good case to show that they are allies or good stewards of the American people. Because not only did CNN not allow the debate to be televised, they were in Atlanta a city that is iconic for its Black American population and freedmen culture. And yet they did not invite any Black news outlets. I'm not saying these Black news outlets do good towards us, but they should have at least been giving access.
And speaking of that, Jim Clyburn is one of the politicians that has spoken out about Joe Biden's performance during the debate. I want to play this small clip from him here. He doesn't seem to think that Joe Biden has a problem at all. Everyone listen to this.
Joe Biden has a history of stuttering. He did that as a child. All of us know how stutterers operate. I went to school with one. So when you have trouble getting out a word, that is what comes from stuttering. But when he expressed opinions, he was on the money with the opinions. He may not have gotten the word out, but the thoughts were great.
What is your take on that, Marcel, about what Jim Clyburn there, first of all, calling people stutterers, and then two, he said Joe Biden may not have gotten the words out, but the thought was great.
Well, they're all making up words that are unintelligible. I don't know what is a stutterer, but in any case, I'm not sure how he's able to gauge Joe Biden's thoughts, because I did not hear one coherent thought at all from Joe Biden during that debate. I mean, did you? I remember one time Donald Trump said that illegal immigrants are coming in, raping and killing people. And Joe Biden's response, I did not hear all of it, but it was something along the lines of, no, they're being raped by their brothers-in-laws and uncles and cousins. I was like, huh? So I'm not sure. I did not hear one coherent thought there at all. But James Clyburn is doing what we know James Clyburn is going to do. He's going to defend Joe Biden no matter what. I am more appalled that Joe Biden, who is the elected official right now, who is our president, was not really able to convey a vision for what he has for us at all.
Right. There wasn't much talk about, I felt like neither one of them really talked about their plan.
Exactly.
Moving forward, or just for anybody, like just for the American people, period. I feel like they didn't really have a plan. Joe Biden, obviously, we understand he's going to try to defend his record because he is the incumbent. But I just didn't feel like either one of them had a clear plan or path forward.
That's what it was for most of the debate. It was both of them defending their record, and it was almost like a race to the bottom. Like I said, people like to say lesser of the two evils. Well, Trump is definitely lesser of the two evils when you look at history of how freedmen have been treated in this country. But it was both of them pretty much defending their defending their record during the debate. I want to hear more about their policies for us, and that did not happen. I also do not feel the moderators did a good job of making them answer the questions. They would even say, again, please answer the question, and they still would not. I wanted the moderators to hold their feet to the fire, both of them. And I know there was a question proposed to Donald Trump about would he respect the outcome of the election. I feel that question should have been proposed to Joe Biden as well, because the Democratic Party is the one that has really been acting lately in a very undemocratic way.
I hear you. And I think the most controversial statement from the debate, or the one that went the most viral, is the statement from Donald Trump about Black jobs. Now, I am willing to, I'm a big woman here, and I'm willing to admit when I have been wrong. And it has been brought to my attention that I was definitely incorrect on this particular issue. And I saw this tweet from you here, which I did not know about this. Marcel said here, y'all literally used the term Black jobs 11 years ago, hypocrites. And this is a screenshot from The Root, which is a liberal, I would call it a liberal outlet. The Root mainly covers Black stories, Black culture, but it's liberal. And so The Root actually covered this in 2013. Black jobs crisis. Could GOP do better? So what Marcel was pointing out here in this tweet is that here were liberals, liberal media that used that term, Black jobs. But when Donald Trump used it, they cried, foul, and they said, how dare he say that, and that type of thing. I did not realize that they had made this statement back then as well. But why do you think so many people were upset by that phrase? Do you think they were mad because it was the phrase black jobs, or do you think people were upset because it came from Donald Trump?
I think the latter. It came from Donald Trump. Look, the term black jobs or variation of it is not new. It's been used by many, many presidents before. They may not literally say the words black jobs, but they'll say jobs for quote unquote African Americans. Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan. There's always been variations of people saying jobs for African Americans, or they even talk about black unemployment. But Al Sharpton, just a few months before the debate, called for more black jobs. In the root, they usually promote the Democratic Party. They don't like to admit it, but they usually do. Just a few months ago, they called for more black jobs. I think it was a deflection from a legitimate point that Donald Trump was making about how, yes, I'm not going to blame these illegal immigrants for there being an issue with well-paying jobs in this nation. That's a corporate issue. Corporations are doing that, and politicians are doing that. However, Joe Biden never responded to the point that Donald Trump was making. And I think in order to deflect from the disastrous job that Joe Biden did, they made a big deal about black job, that terminology. But he also said black childcare, and strange enough, he also said Hispanic jobs. And no one has been outraged about that. You definitely hear people from the quote-unquote Hispanic community outraged about that at all.
That's a good point. You're right. That seemed to be overlooked.
Yeah, I'm sorry. May I get 1 second? I'm sorry. I hate to do it. I'll be right back.
Marcel will be right back. I'm going to go to some of the statements here from you guys, some of the comments here. I think Be Easy actually just mentioned that about the Hispanic job. Yeah, Be Easy said, he said Hispanic jobs, why no outrage? You know what? I really do think that was overlooked, that the media just kind of, looked past that.
Well, may I say something? I want more black jobs. And everyone's feigning, to me, stupidity or feigning ignorance. Well, what is a black job? What is a black job? Any job in this nation is a black job. We have historically and currently we still do all the jobs. I want more black jobs. I am not offended by that term. We say black communities, and people say, well, we run the black community. In which community do we run, honestly? We say black businesses. That is a term that we all use. We want more black businesses. A lot of presidents have said that. I want to invest in black businesses. No one's offended. I think it's internalized anti-black racism, honestly, Sabrina, because people are saying, oh, Trump was referring to menial jobs when he said that. Trump never expounded on that phrase. And by the way, he was specifically asked a question that was pertaining to the black community when he made that term. But he never expounded. He never even implied that black jobs referred to something degrading, which, by the way, I don't look down on any job at all. And I think we should adopt that attitude. There is no job that we should look down upon. Any job that is honest is a job that we should honor, and a person should be respected for having it. However, a black job could be something from a custodian to someone who's working as a cybersecurity senior analyst. We should respect all of them. But we say black businesses, we say black churches, we say black communities. The government tracks black unemployment. We say black marriages. We say black love. Any job that's held by a black person in this country is a black job. And any job that a black person would have had if not for corporations trying to import cheap labor and politicians trying to import a new constituency instead of investing in their current constituents doing policies for them, that is a black job. I think people are just trying to deflect from the fact that Trump demolished Biden, and both sides, this is something mainly the Democrats do, there is a whole infrastructure where they invest in social media influencers to try to control the narrative. And I definitely believe that's what's taking place here.
It's interesting because I think some people assume that when Trump said black jobs, that he was referring to low skilled or low wage jobs. And I think that was like when I talked about it after the debate, there were people in the chat that were basically saying like, oh, it must mean like a minimum wage job or something like that. But no, I mean, like that's what I said to people after the debate. I said, we have all different types of jobs. Like we don't. But at one point in time, and this is something I think more people should look up and be more aware of. At one point in time in this country, we did have more manufacturing jobs. We had more. I know my grandparents left the South. They're from North Carolina and South Carolina. They left the South, the Carolinas area, and they moved to Baltimore. This is during the Great Migration part because there were more jobs there. And when they got to Baltimore, they got jobs at factories. Like this was not an uncommon thing during that point in time. What apparently has happened over time, though, I can speak for Baltimore. I can't speak for other cities. A lot of those plants closed. A lot of those factories closed. And when they closed, there went the jobs. What I have been hearing from other people is that those few jobs that are left here in the United States, to your point, CEOs of these corporations decided that they wanted cheap labor. So they decided, oh, well, how can I get this work done for less money? Just to pay the workers a lower wage, but still get the work done. And that's where I guess the statement that Trump was making about, he said that the immigration that was happening, they were getting those jobs. And I blame the corporations for that. Like, I don't blame immigrants. I don't blame migrants. I do blame the corporations because this goes into the capitalist system where they're trying to find a way to be greedy once again, just like NAFTA. If you go back to NAFTA, that was greed. That was another way of these corporations to say, we're just going to send these jobs overseas because it's going to make us a lot more money, but we'll still get the products produced. And there has to be something that we can do in this country to stop these corporations from underpaying people.
That's why my plan, in order to combat mass immigration, because you have illegal immigration, which is a problem, but you also have legal immigration where you have companies. For example, even though I'm a public school teacher, I recently switched over to the cybersecurity sector, and people are having a very, very difficult time getting a job in that sector. And one factor, is not the only factor, is that these companies want to import people here on work visas so that they can do the jobs, but for a lower rate. And some of those people who are immigrants who come here on work visas have been complaining about how they're not being paid and how they're being mistreated. That is a lack of accountability for the corporations. We need to have an infrastructure where corporations can be fined, and in some cases, the business owners can be jailed. But there's an out they have right now. There's a clause which says that they can be punished if they knowingly hire someone in the country illegally. And they use that as an out because they can just say, well, I use an agency. It happens all the time. I want to change that language from knowingly to recklessly. They should have an infrastructure in place where they should know that if they hire someone in the nation, that person is here legally. Now, of course, some illegal immigrants use fake social security numbers or things of that nature, but the corporations have responsibility as well. But there's a part we don't talk about enough. Politicians. Politicians are often in bed with these corporations. And there are some politicians, usually on the Democratic side, and I know I'm talking more to the progressive viewers, but I do not believe in any part of this country should a person in this nation illegally be given the right to vote. That is something that is sacred, that should only be for American citizens. But you have politicians, usually on the Democratic side, they realize that the freedmen population is waking up. We're finally starting to demand things for our vote after 60 years of voting, most part, for the Democratic Party. I'm not saying all of us do. In fact, most of us don't vote. Over half of us don't vote. But those of us who do, it would usually go to the Democratic Party. They are starting to demand more things, such as reparations. So now they want to import a new constituency. No. The same way corporations should not be able to import cheap labor because they don't want to pay American workers fairly. Politicians should not be able to import a new constituency because they don't want to work on behalf of the Americans that elect them.
But what do you think is going to happen, particularly with the job market? Because it's a problem, and this is getting worse over time. I'll get into the cost of living report for 2024 later on tonight in the show, and you guys will see what I'm talking about. But the reality is, as long as corporations can hire cheaper labor, they will continue to do so. Even when you look at some of the companies that are going on strike, remember the UAW went on strike. They were already trying to get other workers to come in and to be strike breakers, to break the picket line. Like, oh, we'll just get workers from somewhere else and we'll pay them less and they'll do the job. That should not be legal.
Exactly. And that's the point right there. That's why I was saying politicians, corporations are in bad. And ultimately, you know who's responsible? You, I, everyone. The American voter. We are ultimately responsible. Remember, the government gets their power from us. The government doesn't give us the power and determine the limits of our power. We give the government their power. So when we see that politicians are allowing policies where companies can form conglomerates and raise prices sky high and then say they can't invest in the American public because of inflation, when real inflation happens because companies are not regulated properly. I'm not for overregulation, no, but regulation does need to happen, because if not, you'll have 5 companies, they all work together, they raise the prices sky high, and they all benefiting. We should not have ways where when people go on strike, exercising their civic rights, they can just import cheap labor. That is something we have to demand from the people we elect, or we have to organize to run people for office who will do what we want them to do and what needs to be done, and we elect them.
What is it like where you're from in South Carolina, Marcel, in particular, the job market? Because I know Joe Biden is bragging about job numbers. Like, he continues to say, we created all these jobs, but I still see people in Massachusetts being laid off. And I mean, I'm talking about people finding a job and then 3 months later they got laid off. I see these announcements all the time, whether it's on Facebook or another social media platform, people DMing me privately saying they just got laid off. But according to Joe Biden, the economy is great. I read an article recently that was from Forbes that said that we are now seeing 2008 economic employment numbers. Like, we're back into the 08, stage again. And I feel like the average worker sees this, but of course, the average worker doesn't get to, I guess, speak to corporate media. The average worker doesn't get to, and they're the ones that have the narrative. So the reality is the economy is bad. Inflation is still an issue. And I think about places like where you're from in South Carolina, where there may not have been a lot of jobs to begin with anyway. How are people doing there now economically and the job market?
Well, one thing we have to consider when they brag about their job reports, this goes for Biden, this goes for Trump, this goes for Obama, is a lot of people are employed through the gig sector, okay, which does not have a safety net at all. That's number one. Number two, people talk about, unemployment is so low. Trump did this. Look, when Trump was talking about the black unemployment being at historic low, I didn't celebrate. Okay, that was not sufficient for me. So I'm definitely not going to celebrate for Biden. They don't talk about the quality of jobs. Some people are working one job that's not even covering a third of their necessities. So they have to get a second job or a third job, or they do another job through the gig economy. So they may have jobs, but the quality of jobs are very low. For example, the median income in America, I believe, is like $65,000, $69,000. In South Carolina, for freedmen of Black Americans who are descendants of the emancipated, it's $29,000. So that right there should give you some idea of how desperate things are here. And for white Americans, it's higher, but it hovers around $50,000, still far lower than the median income. So the job market in South Carolina, if you ask people, they will tell you it's great. But yet there was a report that came out from the state newspaper, which is the paper from Columbia, South Carolina, our state's capital, that said that 49% of South Carolinians are having severe struggles to pay their rent, to pay for food.
So I see things haven't changed because for those who don't know, I graduated from the University of South Carolina, and then I worked in Columbia, South Carolina for a couple of years after that. And I struggled. I had 2 jobs at one point. That was just to pay like my rent and the bills and all that jazz. But I was like, there's no way. I was like, dude, there's no way I'm never going to be able to get ahead because the pay was just so low, whether you had a degree or not, unless you went into right. Like unless you went into like law. And even at one point I had friends that were going into the nursing field. And then some of the colleges were like, well, no, the nursing profession is now becoming oversaturated. That's another thing that can also happen. But it's ridiculous. And I think people just assume that because the cost of living in South Carolina may be a lot lower than New York or California, that people don't need to make as much. But that's not necessarily true.
It's not true. And even though the cost of living is lower, the pay is much lower as well. And by the way, the cost of living is not nearly as low as it used to be. That gap between living in California or the state of New York has closed significantly. And yet California, New York, the pay is going to be significantly higher. Yes, the cost of living is still higher in those places, but in South Carolina, it's gotten much higher as well. And while you can still get more for your money, you're just going to have a hard time getting a lot of money. And one, because South Carolina is a very, very rural state. So we do need investment in industries. But that is something that the Democrats are to blame. I'm never going to absolve Clyburn of his responsibility, but this is something that falls in the Republicans' hands. They allow industries to come here and they give them these tax breaks. And on the state government, their budget is ran from taxes. And they allow these industries to get tens of millions of dollars in tax breaks, hundreds of millions of dollars of tax breaks. Meanwhile, South Carolina is the 9th poorest state in the union.
This is very true. And so Black Man is asking, so why keep voting for Clyburn? I know you've said this before on the show, Marcel, but for those who may not have been around during that time, can you explain to everybody who is actually voting for Jim Clyburn?
Well, let me start with who's not. That's the majority. We have like 650,000 eligible voters in my district, South Carolina District 6 alone, and Clyburn usually skates by with just 128 to 150,000 votes. So most people are not voting for him. Of those who do, I don't know why people assume it's Black people voting for him. It's a lot of white liberals, and the Black people who do vote for him are usually people who are in his fraternity, church buddies, head of these nonprofits who he helps make sure they get some funding. But Clyburn usually gets 120, 150,000 votes of 650,000 eligible voters. So where I fault people here in our district is that we have not organized to replace him. Yes, people have ran against him, but we have not organized to get someone to run for office to help them get the amount of votes they need to organize voting blocks and to demand things from him. When Clyburn shows up to a public event, which is very rare, by the way, because, you know, he's not going to do that. People will, take pictures with my baby. Oh, let me get a photo with you, if they even know who he is. I just went to a film premiere, Geechee One Films, which apparently they were the ones that helped Tubi get their start. Tubi used a lot of their films. I went to one of their film premieres this past Saturday, and it was an audience of 60 to 70 people, a lot of young freedmen there in Charleston. And I asked them, well, the host asked them, did they know James Clyburn? 2 people knew who he was. 5 other people said they had heard of him, but they weren't really sure who he was. So it's our fault for not being civically engaged and not doing our civic duty. But I do want to say, my campaign manager has been trying to set up a debate. There's going to be 6 people on the ballot this time. Clyburn, myself, Duke Buckner from the Republican Party, someone from the Alliance Party, someone from the Libertarian Party, and an independent candidate. 4 of us have agreed to a debate. Duke Buckner from the Republican Party, the Alliance Party candidate, the Libertarian candidate, and of course, and I. We can't reach the independent candidate. We've been trying to find him. Now we're going to reach out to Clyburn. It's going to be interesting to see how Clyburn responds to this, because we're going to have the debate no matter what. So either he shows up to defend his record, or we will go on TV and demolish his record, deservingly so.
Will the debate be advertised on, or will the debate be shown on local news?
We're working on that right now. You know, this is going to be the first debate, I believe, in my district during the general election since 1996. That's the level. That's the lack of engagement we have in this nation. It should be mandatory. You do debates. Nancy Pelosi never shows up for debates. Chuck Schumer never showed up for debate. Clyburn is just doing everyone else does. That's no excuse. However, this is going to be the first debate for my research, general elections since 1996. That's the lack of accountability we have here. But Clyburn doesn't show up. We will have a dummy in his place with his name on a placard, and we will go in on his record with facts, not emotions. I will use facts. I don't know what my other contemporaries will use, but I will use facts to go after his record.
This is a really good question here. Thank you, FM. Marcel, ask Clyburn why he supports HR 40 and yet says we are not going to get reparations. It makes no sense. To add to that, I've seen a couple of videos where he has been approached by activists and they're asking him about that. And he was really nasty to them. He was telling them to get the fuck out of his face and everything.
He is very hostile, very belligerent, and very disrespectful. He only talks to Black Americans like that. He only speaks to us like that, who are the majority of his voters. HR 40, let me just say, is not a good bill at all. Let me just give that. Let me preface my comments with that, okay? However, Clyburn was kind of pressured into supporting HR 40. He was getting approached so often by our reparationists here in South Carolina that he, after that reparations confronted him in front of a good bit of people, he then kind of signed on for support of HR 40. Now, keep in mind, HR 40 had been in existence for almost 40 years, okay? By that time, that he finally signed on. But Clyburn doesn't believe we're going to get reparations. But here's the thing. You are a leader. When you are a leader, even if you don't believe something will happen, if it's something that should happen, if it's the thing that should have happened, then it's your responsibility as a leader to fight to make it happen. And even if Clyburn can't get reparations passed, I know it's an uphill battle, he can use his platform. Because I've never denied that Clyburn is a powerful man. He's very powerful. If he actually did things for his constituents, especially his fellow freemen, I would actually be proud of the way he's worked himself up through the ranks. But he could just use his platform alone and make the moral case for reparations. He can talk about how reparations has been done by America many times and is being done right now. And not just for the people who were done wrong, but sometimes for their children, their grandchildren. He can use his platform to help educate people. He refuses to do even that. But he talks about Catawba Native Americans who used to enslave us and who were slave catchers. And the original ones have been dead for centuries, but till this day, he presents a bill that helps them get, and these are the words, this is exact words of the bill: special protection, recognition, justice, and rights. So he does it for other groups, but won't do it for his own. Unforgivable.
That's the same thing I was telling people on Sunday about Byron Donalds. Same thing, because I that was another tweet I saw that you posted that he said he was against reparations, basically because he would not qualify for the descendants of slavery reparations. But he gets money from AIPAC, which means that I'm sure he supports reparations for. There you go.
He would never be against the Holocaust survivors and innocents getting reparations. Never, because AIPAC would dry up those funds like that. But he feels the right to speak about reparations for freemen. Let me just say real quick, this is why sometimes Black Americans have a funny view on immigration. Our the Civil Rights Act made it possible for immigrants from all over the world to come here. It got rid of all those immigration restrictions. And the thanks we get are a lot of children of immigrants. I'm not saying all, but a lot of them, one is too many, being against what we're owed.
Well, here's a question for you from H. Dennis. Thank you so much for this. Can you ask him what he thinks about Trump giving police immunity and privatizing public schools? Thank you.
Well, here's the thing with me. The only area where I align with Trump is the fact that he's against mass immigration, but only after he gets benefits from it. He's going to make sure he benefits from it. After that, he wants us to stop. He says a lot of stupid things. I don't even think he could give police full immunity, but here's what I would say. As far as my people go, the Black Americans who are descendants of the emancipated, who have the status of freedmen, as far as the way we've been treated in many cases, it's already as if the police has immunity. We've seen us unjustly murdered. And here's the thing. Some people who are appalled by Trump saying that are the same ones who would defend the police murdering my people with full immunity. I'm not saying all police do it. I'm not even saying most police do it. But when it happens, some people pretty much want to give the police full immunity to harm us. Now, some people are shook when Trump said that because they realize how it can harm them as well. Like James Baldwin said, if they come for you in the morning, they'll be coming for me that night. What happens to you should be important to me, as what happens to me should be important to you. And as far as privatizing schools, I don't know about that. But if you're referring to, I guess, the funding for students following the child instead of going automatically to the schools, I know I'm speaking to progressives. I know that's something that really irks y'all, but that's something I actually support. So don't get me off the show. I feel like we need to have more options because I'm in South Carolina where I went to, James Clyburn has an area called the Corridor of Shame. It's not just James Clyburn, but it refers to a network of rural, extremely poor communities where sometimes the rate of kids not reading on grade level is as high as 90-95%. I went to such a school. If my people in my community had that funding, we would have started our own community school and taken good care of our own people. Look, y'all, public education in America is modeled after freedmen, after what Black Americans did. After slavery ended, we started our own schools. The schedule for schools, kids to be in school for like 8 months, that came from us. Schools being mandatory, that came from us. We can take care of our own children. The public school system has never done Black American kids right. Now, I believe that schools should be better funded, public schools. But I also believe that people want to have options outside of that. They should.
I think the federal government should fund all public schools, just like they fund the Dodge schools that I went to.
That's what I believe too. Equitable funding. That's what my platform calls for.
And in reference to the quote from James Baldwin, another thing I've mentioned before to people on the show, one of the reasons why we do not have health care for everyone in this country is because they didn't want Black people to get it.
That's the level you see that. And now you have a lot of white people, millions of white people who are suffering from ailments every single day, and they can't afford to get the help they need.
When they made some of those laws, they didn't think about the fact that it would also affect poor white people.
Yes. But Lyndon B. Johnson, what did Lyndon B. Johnson said? He said he realized, and Lyndon B. Johnson was a good old boy too, but he said he realized the only thing you have to do for a white person is to convince them that they're better than the best Negro, and they won't notice that you're picking their pocket. He said, give them someone to look down upon. He said they'll empty their pocket for you. So I need white America, I'm not saying all, but a good segment of white America needs to do some soul searching and realize you cannot hurt Black America without hurting yourself, your children, your grandchildren.
That's
so
right.
Forth and so on.
One more for you, Marcel. Thank you, Old Crow. Sabby, can you ask Marcel if he is doing his own podcast or anything? I'd really like to see some of his other insights.
I have a podcast, but look, hats off to you, so Sabby, Brianna, Joy Gray, all of you do podcasts. I have one. It's called 50 Shades of Grey. Marcel Dixon. Yes, I did a play on words. I'm like that. But I only did 6 episodes, and then I started working full time again as a teacher. When you work as a teacher, it takes everything from you. So I haven't done it since then. At first, I never want to do a podcast. People asked me and told me that I should. I did 6 episodes. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of research if you want to do a quality podcast. And I would like to do one. But I do have some episodes on there. 50 Shades of Grey, Marcel Dixon. I talked about a wide variety of things, from this myth of the Black community being so much more homophobic than others. I talked about how it's going to be up to us to get the politics that we deserve and need. So please do check it out.
Oh, and sorry, one more for you, Marcel.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. Why not use negative campaign ads against Clyburn?
I will never use negative ads against Clyburn, but I will use the truth. And I do have commercials that I ran against Clyburn that use the truth. Maybe if you go on Twitter or you search Greg Marcel Dixon, you will see some of my commercials against him. I compare a person going to a doctor who has every single patient of his has died. I said, would you go to that doctor? I said, imagine a teacher and every single one of their students fail every single year. Would you want your child in that teacher's class? So I said, my people in South Carolina District 6, Clyburn has been in office for 31 years, and yet he has the 6th poorest district out of 435 total in America. And yet we keep reelecting him. So I'm not going to go negative on Clyburn, but I will use the truth. I've called Clyburn out a lot. I called out how he's done land policies to help other groups get land justice, but not for the freedmen, his own people. So I used the truth against Clyburn, and I don't consider that negative. I just call it the truth. And I told his daughter, who called herself coming at me, one of his daughters, Jennifer, I think, I said, if I'm lying, show me where I'm lying. And she could not.
Marcel, where can people follow your campaign?
Marcel, the number for Congress. Marcel for Congress on Twitter. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's the same thing. Facebook is Marcel for Congress, the word FOR. And my website is marcelforcongress.com.
Awesome. Marcel, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again. You take care.
Bye. All right, guys, that was Marcel Dixon. Again, you can, sorry about that one. Again, you can follow his campaign at Marcel for Congress. That's his website. There, again, he's running third party against Jim Clyburn. So if you live in his district and you're tired of Jim, you can support Marcel Dixon. I think a lot of people are tired of Jim Clyburn at this point. He is a doozy. Good God, a doozy. All right, guys, we have a pretty big show tonight, and I am going to do the call-in show after the show tonight. We do a little call-in. It's called the Sabby After Show. It's via Zoom. I put the link in the chat towards the end of the show, and you can join Zoom, and we can talk one-on-one. Because you guys are in the chat, but I get to hear your voice when you come onto Zoom. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you would want to come on Zoom tonight because we just have so much to discuss. And I want to go ahead and show the thumbnail so you can see what else we're going to talk about tonight as well. But first, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Again, big show tonight. Hopefully tonight will be a learning discussion because there's a lot happening, whether it's the Supreme Court or the presidential election. There's a lot going on. All right. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies. Don't forget about those Sabbies. And of course, there are members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker. All right. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you. Yes, that's right, Dwayne. That's right. A lot to say tonight. There's so much to talk about. Someone threw me another story right before I went live, and I said, that will have to wait till Thursday. Okay. That will have to wait till Thursday because it's so much that is happening. Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail so you'll see what other stories we're going to discuss tonight. I also have a bonus story too. Again, a lot going on. A lot. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Brianna Joy Gray and Kim Iversen debate RFK. That's an interesting discussion, and I'm going to show you what I think is really starting to happen. And you're going to see this more and more as we get closer to the election. It is now July. Believe it or not, November is not that far away. I'm going to tell you why I think this conversation may have been a little as heated as it is. And we'll get into that. I'm also going to discuss Donald Trump immunity approved. We're going to break this down. Eric and I talked about this earlier today, and I think there's something that people may not be aware of about this particular situation and how it can affect not just Donald Trump, but other presidents going forward. There's also a poll pinned to the top of the chat there about that particular story. So don't forget to answer that question. Your mind may change after we cover the story. We're also going to discuss media pundits called out over Biden. You'll see there's Anderson Cooper there, and there is Mika from Morning Joe. Everything is happening, folks. Shit is starting to hit the fan. And a lot of these media pundits that have been defending Joe Biden for quite some time, they are being called out to their face. Some of them are willing to cave and bear responsibility, and some of them are not. You're going to see that. And of course, Marcel Dixon was just here. And we do have a bonus story that I want to get to tonight. I've been waiting for this to be released. Can you afford to live in your state? You may think that you can, but after you see the new out of reach cost of living report for 2024, you may be surprised. We're going to get into that as well. We'll have a little interactive play with the audience there with that story, just like we did last year. So let's go ahead to some of the comments in the chat. Let's give a shout out to Jillian Chalox, who just became a Sabby member. Give Jillian a big whoop, whoop in the house. Shout out to Jillian. New York Varsity. Yeah, for anyone who is a one issue voter, the Iversen Joy Gray debate is not going to sit well with them. Hold on to that, New York Varsity, because that's a really good point. That's a good point. I don't want to give too much away right now, but that's a good point. Shout out to Old Crow for being a Sabby member for 5 months. Says Brother Marcel is on target. Thank you, Roger. Replace corporations with worker co-ops. Renard says the day that the elites feared the most has arrived. Black America is waking up. Yeah, I bet you the Democratic Party didn't think they would have to deal with this as soon as they are now. They probably didn't foresee this coming for quite some time. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Clyburn looks like hard fiber oatmeal full of ish. Hard fiber oatmeal. That's hard fiber oatmeal. I don't even know what that means. Ow, it hurts to laugh. I'm gonna try to mimic the laugh because oh my God. I went to the gym twice yesterday, you guys. I know that was stupid, but I did it. I went to the gym earlier in the morning and then I went to the gym in the evening and everything hurts. If I turn this way, I feel it. If I turn that way, I feel it. I did like a new core exercise yesterday and I feel it like all around me, you know? I did upper body then I did lower body. So I got bodied. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started to our first story. I am Eric. Eric is right to call me out for this. Sabby addicted to the gym. And I need to tell you guys too, Eric brought it to my attention. And he said that like, I don't think everyone knows what you mean when you say you have to train. Yeah, I should probably explain what that means to people. Yeah, if I say I have training, I'm talking about weightlifting. So I do weight training. So yeah, Eric is right. Sabby is addicted to the gym. Somebody told me that all of us at RBN are going to show up to protest looking like gladiators. I can see it happening because JB's also going to the gym. My comrade Nick, you guys know Nick does MMA, right? Mixed martial arts. If you guys didn't know that, like he does MMA. So I wouldn't want to fight Nick. Would you? I don't want to fight Nick. All right, guys. Okay. Let's get to our first story. The media pundits. Oh my God. Yes. Morning Joe and CNN. So you got Mika and Anderson Cooper and a couple of others. They are being called out because of defending Joe Biden for all these years. And now for them to have like this embarrassing performance on the debate stage, they are getting railed by the New York Times, by the Washington Post, all of these different outlets that are basically pointing fingers at them and say, stop it, just admit it. Joe Biden is done. He needs to step aside. What do they have to say about that? Let's start off with Mika. Because Morning Joe was probably the worst. They were probably the worst ones to run cover for Joe Biden. So let's get started with them.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe on this Monday, July 1st. This morning, we are waking up to a sea of headlines and opinion pieces from major news organizations, former party leaders, and very loud whispers, mostly behind the scenes, from present leading Democrats who say it is over. Here's a taste of the global call for President Joe Biden to get out of the race. The New York Times editorial board says Biden is not the man he was 4 years ago, calling his candidacy, quote, a reckless gamble. Editors at Georgia's largest newspaper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, echoed that take, demanding the president pass the torch. Quote, Biden deserves a better exit from public life than the one he endured when he shuffled off the stage on Thursday night. And then there were the headlines, sneering, mocking, jeering all at once. This was the performance that has gotten us to this point.
We have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
It was bad. He said, we quote, we beat Medicare. He couldn't seem to land a thought. It was an unmitigated disaster by any measure. More than 3 days after that debate, it is still hard to comprehend what we saw from the president. The weak, raspy voice, the inability to complete basic thoughts. Most importantly, the failure to call out Donald Trump on his endless lies. Where was that? And yet, the very next day in North Carolina, there was Joe Biden, back to form, finding his voice, his winning smile, the vintage sparkle back in his eyes. Two appearances that were as different as, well, night and day.
And that is because that was before 6 p.m. at night. That was during the day, not during the evening, even though we have seen Joe Biden have these gaffes during the day as well. So to be fair, but what I want to call out there that Mika mentioned, people have to keep in mind that Mika will not come forward and make this statement had there not been pressure from the other media outlets that she just mentioned. So just be clear about that. Her and Joe, they have been running cover for Joe Biden ever since the moment that he got, actually, no, before he got into office, during the 2020 Democrat debates, where I noticed there was a change in Joe Biden. You know, him talking about this corn pop dude. I noticed then he struggled to answer some of the debate questions. But when I brought those things up, people said, shh, you want to get Trump? Do you want to get Trump? I was like, okay, but you can see the difference between Joe Biden. Now, if you compare him from today to 2020, now you see a dramatic difference from 2020. So this is how these things can progress over time. This is Mika trying to find a way to do damage control.
I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know.
But he doesn't know how to tell the truth, because one thing else I want to add too, the reason why you didn't see Joe Biden debunk Donald Trump's lies is because Joe Biden was also telling lies, which I showed you after the debate. There were a number of lies that he told as well. So here again is corporate media being disingenuous. And she's not the only one. Other liberal media commentators are saying that Donald Trump was the one that told all the lies and Joe Biden is the truth teller. But the reality is that both candidates told a number of lies. I think that Donald Trump told more, but they're still trying to get you to believe there is a lesser of two evil. So do you see how this works, ladies and gentlemen? Let's fast forward a little bit here. Here we go.
The 80th anniversary of D-Day and a state dinner with President Macron, and then to Italy for the G7, followed by a flight across 12 time zones to LA for a fundraiser with former President Barack Obama. Just 33 hours later, he was headed back to the East Coast. The debate was also 2 weeks after his son Hunter was convicted on 3 felony gun charges and faces prison time. President Biden painfully told America he would not pardon his son.
Let me pause for a second because Mika is trying to make excuses for his performance. And I just have to say this. Yes, the debate was 3 weeks after Hunter Biden was found guilty. However, that being said, let's get away from the elite bubble for just a second and let's talk about everyday working people that have to get up in the morning and go to work regardless of what just happened to them. There are people that work at McDonald's. There are people that work at Starbucks that have had family members that have died the day before and still had to go into work because they didn't get grievance pay. Okay, so Joe Biden's son being found guilty, especially considering the fact that Hunter Biden is alive, that's not an excuse. And he had 3 weeks time to get over the guilty verdict. That's Mika reaching. So this is corporate media trying to protect Joe Biden in every way, shape, or form. I know kids that have had to get up in the morning and go to school knowing that someone on their block just got shot. And they had to go to school because they had a test the next day. Okay, people do this all the time. How many of you know people that work in the health industry? How many times nurses still have to get up and still have to go on call regardless of what just happened to their family member right before then? So that's not an excuse, Mika. Oh, he might be dealing with some emotional things. Something's really bad because, he might be feeling some kind of way because of the Hunter thing. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks later, there are companies that I've worked for where you don't even get any grievance time if you lost a family member, or if you did get grievance time, you get 3 days. And then they try to tell you who you are allowed to grieve over and who you're not allowed to grieve over, right? So if it's not a spouse or a parent, really reaching here.
I really question his schedule. It makes me angry that he was moving across the world on 4 different time zones. It seems to me this is a lack of discipline. These were important events that he was going to, but the stakes in this election could not be any higher. Like many, I want to know, was this a one-off episode or a sign of what's to come? Can his team and the president himself move forward with more discipline and also manage the fact that he's 81? And while we're at it, let's talk about his age. Age is wisdom and experience that in the case of Joe Biden leads to more bipartisan legislation passed than any president over the past few generations and the largest expansion of NATO's alliance in history. Under Joe Biden and his age, America is stronger economically and militarily than any time in half a century.
Under Joe Biden's presidency and under his age, I really don't think the NATO expansion is something that you should brag about. A lot of us that are not for these wars are not okay with NATO expanding. So let's go ahead and push back on that talking point. Bipartisan legislation has been passed under Joe Biden's presidency, but what has been passed for the American people? When it came to bipartisan legislation that was passed for the American people, we were always shortchanged. When it comes to these wars, they have no problem giving Ukraine all the money that they want and the weapons that they need. They have no problem giving Israel all the money that they want. So what pieces of legislation is Mika referring to? She doesn't go into detail. That is important to know. Here is Mika trying to make excuses or trying to get you to support Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden doesn't even know what he's doing. You literally have someone here who is half senile. And Mika wants you to keep him in office while we have multiple wars that have been started under his administration. And this is who we're supposed to trust in the White House. Most of you don't trust him now. We'll get to the numbers and I'll show you what I mean.
And while facts may not matter to Donald Trump and his friends in the far right media, those are the objective facts. And that is the undeniable truth. Here's another truth. Age also needs to be managed. On my 50 over 50 lists, I celebrate women who are reaching their highest power well over 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90. And yet every one of those women are managing their fabulous age. I don't think it's over. This moment in the race fits the entire narrative of Joe Biden's life. In his personal and professional life, Biden has repeatedly risen up from rock bottom. It's what we love about him. So many draw hope from his empathy and his ability to have perspective, even right now, and to persevere when he is completely counted out. His list of losses and failures is long and would be unbearable for most.
A lot of people have, okay, so I'm sorry. So again, these are not excuses, okay? Mika is talking about Joe Biden as if he's the only one who's endured any type of loss or suffering and still had to perform well. A lot of people have to deal with that. They're called the working class, Mika. Most Americans that are a part of the working class, they have to deal with these things. They've had failures. They've had deaths in the family. They've had loss. They've had struggle, and they still have to get up and go to work. Some of them working multiple jobs, by the way. So I'm sorry, but just because you've dealt with struggle and loss in your life, that doesn't mean we should vote for you. It's like, what is this, a sympathy card?
In 1972, his wife and baby daughter were killed in a car accident. He had been elected to the Senate and took the oath of office in his surviving son's hospital room to remain by their bedsides. In 1987, his first campaign for president came to an end, and so nearly did his life, when a few months later, he suffered a brain aneurysm. It was so severe that his doctor told him his chance of survival was less than half, just to survive the surgery.
He went through all these bad things, so you need to vote for him because he went through bad things in his life.
And even if he lived, a long list of physical and mental limitations were likely. At his bedside before the surgery, he told his sons he was proud of them. And then Joe Biden survived the surgery, rehabilitated, and didn't look back. In 2008, his second bid for the presidency came to another early, painful end. After a poor showing in Iowa, he finished near the bottom with less than 1% of the vote, his campaign bottoming out after another low blow. And yet, the following summer, Biden would be back on the Democratic ticket as Barack Obama's running mate. 5 years later, a year into his second term as vice president, Joe Biden's son, Beau, was diagnosed with brain cancer, believed to have been caused by exposure to burn pits while his son was serving in Iraq as a captain in the Army National Guard.
And he's continuing to fund these wars, regardless of the fact of what happened to his son. Everybody understand that? He's continuing to fund these wars, regardless of what happened to his son.
Beau would die 2 years later. The second child Joe Biden would have to bury. That is the lowest of lows in Joe Biden's life. In 2015, another political failure. Barack Obama chose to support Hillary Clinton as his heir apparent and not even his own vice president. After numerous political and personal setbacks, Joe Biden may have questioned whether he would ever return to presidential politics again.
If you listen to Mika very closely, you can hear the emotion in her voice. She sounds like she's about to cry. Her voice is a little bit shaky. She put her emotions into this. And let me give a warning about this. Some of us had put our emotions into a former presidential candidate, and that was Bernie Sanders. And when Bernie disappointed us, we were incredibly hurt. Mika's job here is a commentator, But it was very apparent to me that Mika was emotionally invested in Joe Biden being president. And that is what you hear. It's like she's begging. She's reading off all these things that happened to Joe Biden as if Joe Biden just died. Are we at a funeral? No, we're not. Why are you reading off all these things that happened to this man? That is to get a sympathy card. That is to get some type of sympathy out of the viewer so that you will show up and support and vote for Joe Biden. That is sad that that's what you have to reach for to get people to come out and support him. Isn't this sad?
And then came Charlottesville and the vile racist march by white supremacists and neo-Nazis across the UVA campus. As a direct response to what he saw as a threat to our nation's core values, Biden announced his third try for the White House. And just like his first two presidential campaigns, he was staring at an early exit in the race, stumbling in the first Democratic debate after a broadside by Kamala Harris. He finished a distant fourth in Iowa and an even worse fifth in New Hampshire.
And you guys contacted Jim Clyburn and said, help him win South Carolina and turn this thing around. Because otherwise, had it not been for that, Bernie Sanders would have won the Democratic nomination, although the DNC would have still played some tricks to make sure that they didn't give it to him. But we all saw the writing on the wall. We saw what was happening, right?
All experts, just like right now, said it was over for the man from Scranton.
No one has gotten this far, finishing fourth and fifth. And
we'll just stop it there because I'm sorry. She goes a little bit far there. And then we're just going to fast forward a bit here. She goes into his wins and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is terrible. I've never seen, I've never seen them go this hard before.
My family and I, as you know, have known this man for decades, and his family as well. And yes, I know them personally. And I still believe in Joe Biden.
And that's the problem right there. The fact that she has a personal relationship with Joe Biden. Her family has known the Bidens for decades, and that is why she is emotionally invested. I would say you probably shouldn't be covering stories about Joe Biden, Mika. In fact, if I was over there at MSNBC and it was my network, I would actually recuse you from those stories about Joe Biden because of the personal relationship that you have with him, and maybe have you focus on stories with people that you do not have a personal relationship with. Obviously, that is how you get biased journalism or commentary. So you see the reaching. Now, she wants you to believe that what happened with Joe Biden at the debate was just a fluke. He was so much better in North Carolina that other day. It's just a fluke. This is not a real issue. You got to stand by Joe Biden. Just a fluke, huh? Let me show you something that also happened during that debate that many people are not talking about. Pay very close attention to Dana Bash's hand over here. Nobody is talking about the moderator signaling multiple times to direct his attention. Watch this.
President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states. And under the issue of immigration and border security, President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the...
In case temporarily elected.
Did you guys see it? Why was Dana... Watch this. I'll put it on mute when I play it this time. You put it right there. Why is Dana? Look at that. There it is. Why was she signaling to Joe Biden? Look over that way, Joe. And how come no one else is calling this out? And how was that allowed? So there is Dana Bash, someone who was a CNN commentator, openly assisting Joe Biden during the debate. There it is. There it is. Very important, right? Then you have CNN. Now, Anderson Cooper, stunned beyond belief at Carl Bernstein on CNN right now. Listen to what Carl Bernstein told Anderson Cooper about Joe Biden's presidency and about his reelection chances. Listen.
Journalist. So, Carl, according to the people you've been talking to, What are you hearing?
Well, these are people, several of them, who are very close to President Biden, who love him, have supported him, have been among them are some people who have raised a lot of money for him. And they are adamant that what we saw the other night, the Joe Biden we saw, is not a one-off, that there have been 15, 20 occasions in the last year and a half when the president has appeared somewhat as he did in that horror show.
15 to 20 times in the past year where that has happened. 15 to 20 times in the past year. I love the fact that he called it a horror show. He said in that horror show, because that's what it was. No, as we've been saying before, this was not a one-off. Anderson Cooper is stunned.
That we witness. And what's so significant is the people that this is coming from, and also how many people around the president are aware of such incidents, including some reporters, incidentally, who have witnessed some of them. But here we see tonight, as these people say, President Biden at his absolute best, and yet these people who have supported him, loved him, campaigned for him, see him often, say that in the last 6 months particularly, there has been a marked incidence of cognitive decline and physical infirmity.
What I wonder about is the people who were, working with him at Camp David, allegedly in this intensive debate prep, if there were concerns there about this, and I don't know if you have got any word about that, but how anybody involved in that debate prep, I mean, didn't anybody see something?
Well, the debate prep was supervised by Ron Klain, who has been with President Biden for many years. And people I've talked to have all been to Ron Klain in the last year to say, we have a problem. We have a problem such as we saw the other night.
So see, guys, the mask is off. And I guess you got to protect Bernstein here for revealing all this on CNN, that they told them that there was a problem. They were having issues with Joe Biden, and they pushed this anyway.
There have been numerous instances where the president has lost his train of thought, can't pick it up again. There was a fundraiser at which he started at the podium, and then he became very stiff, according to people there, as if it were almost a kind of rigor mortis.
This was reported allegedly in June of 2020.
This was June of, this was a year ago almost exactly, at the old Four Seasons restaurant on Park Avenue.
He even gave you the address, the old Four Seasons at Park Avenue. Carl took notes and came prepared.
And he became very stiff, and a chair had to be brought for him to do the latter part of the event. I think that what these folks are saying and have been saying for a while is, yes, he's great when we see him as we have tonight, but he also has these inexplicable moments that we're very concerned about, and you, Ron Klain, and the First Family, we need to talk about this. And
let me pause for a second. Let me tell you something. The doctor knows. There's no way, whoever Joe Biden's doctor is, there's no way the doctor does not know about this. But sometimes doctors are asked to keep quiet, right? Like, don't get this out to the public. It's not like we haven't had a president before that was experiencing medical issues and it was kept quiet from the public. This has happened before. So the doctor knows what's going on with Joe Biden, but by keeping that secret, that means that everyone that works with Joe Biden, they have to figure out a way to fix this and to deal with this at the same time with not really telling the public what the hell has been going on. And then if it wasn't for that debate performance, I don't even think these people would be speaking out about this right now. If Joe Biden, let's pretend that debate didn't happen. If that debate did not happen, would you hear this rhetoric right now on all of the mainstream media? No, you would not. The only reason you're hearing it right now is because it happened on the debate stage. Even though we've seen it happen during other press conferences that Joe Biden has had, other interview appearances that he's had as well. Remember, he tried to sit down midair in a chair that was not there. So the thing about this, and if you've had a relative that has had dementia or some type of cognitive decline, then you would know that there can be good days and there can be bad days. There can be good times and there can be bad times of that same day. So some days may be okay. They may be all right. And then other days they may not be okay. And as time goes by, they continue to decline. I'll show you this in just a second about the time of day with Joe Biden, because it's apparent that earlier in the day, he tends to be a little bit better, but after a certain time, he's not as good. So he doesn't have as much energy and those symptoms are more apparent. But that's the thing about dementia. That's the thing about cognitive decline, is that there can be good times and bad times. And sometimes you may catch all the good times and sometimes you may catch all the bad times. And sometimes you may not be present for either.
Been pushed back repeatedly whenever it's been brought up.
And did your sources tell you about topics he's particularly engaged in, or are there?
Not only, and it's not just these same people. There is no question. I have heard for 2 years how sharp Joe Biden is in his national security meetings. He has special briefing books on Ukraine, on the situation in Gaza that go down into very detailed military reports. He has an absolute command of the facts. He's sharp as can be. You see the evidence of his being the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, of his work as vice president on foreign relations. So we're clearly dealing with two sets of one person. And it really needs to be explored, according to the people I'm talking to, and I think an awful lot of major Democrats believe this, including some who have made statements to the contrary. But this is a problem that's not going to go away unless it's explicable. Does this mean doctors' reports? I mean, obviously it'd be great if we could have real doctors' reports from both candidates. Well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
He said real doctor reports. So you see, he knows, he understands what's going on there. Anderson Cooper stunned. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is happening. And then we also have Jake Tapper. Now, Jake Tapper comes forward just to let people know that he is not taking the blame for this. That's what Jake Tapper does in this segment here. He's like, wait a minute. I am not taking the fall for this one, fam.
In an attempt to reassure voters about his fitness for office, Biden campaign chair Jan O'Malley Dillon holding a call with party leaders earlier today, telling them this too shall pass. There is a discernible pattern of Democratic officials seemingly trying to convince you, the public, to not believe what you saw and what you heard with your eyes and with your ears on Thursday night.
So think about what he just said. Let's bring that back. Listen to this again. This is funny. I'm sorry.
Leaders earlier today telling them this too shall pass. There is a discernible pattern of Democratic officials seemingly trying to convince you, the public, to not believe what you saw and what you heard with your eyes and with your ears on Thursday night.
Oh my God, that is really bad. That is really bad. So notice the difference between his commentary, Anderson Cooper's commentary, and Mika's commentary. Mika is like, I've known Joe Biden for years, so vote for him, damn it. He's been through a lot. Anderson Cooper's like, why didn't anybody say anything about this? What is happening? Oh no, too much information being released. No. Jake Tapper is like, look, people don't want you to believe what you saw and heard with your own eyes and your own ear.
What I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare, the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Democratic officials have tried to spin this in many ways. They said President Biden just had a cold. They said it was just one off night, akin to when President Obama in 2012 was rusty and seemed a little huffy. But behind the scenes, make no mistake, most Democratic officials witnessed the same shocking spectacle that you did. The difficulty that the presumptive Democratic nominee, the current president of the United States, had just articulating his basic thoughts during the 90 minutes of the debate.
Yeah, so Jake is there to let you know, I'm not Mika, I'm not Morning Joe. I know exactly what I saw and you know what you saw. So now we're starting to see a split in corporate media where some commentators and pundits are still trying to defend Joe Biden's performance and others are like, nah, the jig is up. Let's get somebody else in there. The jig is up. Let's get somebody's in there. And it appears this tends to happen after a certain time. So we're going to bring this up here as well. This is coming from Biden's aides. Biden aides said his debate performance was poor because he struggles to function after 4 p.m. After 4 p.m. And I even think they're stretching this as well. Because like I said, we have seen conversations that Joe Biden has had, whether they have been press conferences that were before 4 p.m. and he was still struggling then as well. So essentially, they're trying to say that he is sundowning. However, as much as Mika wanted to praise his performance in Raleigh, North Carolina after the debate, here we are again, just recently, Joe Biden commenting about the Trump immunity ruling from SCOTUS, and he does it again. I mean, we're not even 2 weeks out. Here we go.
I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote.
End of quote. He is reading off the teleprompter. End of quote is a note that tells you that is the end of that quote. He's done this before. Now, someone who is with it, they're not going to read that. They know not to read end of quote. And as much as Mika wants to make you feel sympathetic towards Joe Biden and thinks that you need to support him because he's her friend and he went through a lot of bad things in his life, but I would argue a lot of people have gone through bad things in their life. The reality is the American people have spoken. If you look at the poll here from CNN after the debates, should Biden be running for president? 28% said he should. 72% said that Joe Biden should not run for president. 72%. It's not even a close call. It's not even like, that's embarrassing. So now the media, they're scrambling because they have been lying about Joe Biden for years. They were the ones that pushed people. We need to get Joe Biden needs to win in 2020. Dana Bash, I remember during the Democratic primary debates, she was upset when Bernie Sanders won New Hampshire and Nevada. She was like, Bernie Sanders has won Nevada. What does this mean for Joe Biden? They were all behind this. And now they look foolish because they refuse to admit what a lot of us saw even back then. So they wanted Joe Biden. They pushed Joe Biden. They got Joe Biden. And this is what you're stuck with. Because the reality is Kamala Harris doesn't have a great approval rating either. And she's next in line as the vice president. They're already talking about bringing in other people or possibly bringing in other people like Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer. They're not polling to beat Donald Trump either. This is a mess, but they set themselves up for this mess. Disaster. So the media is trying to find a way to cover their ass. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. Dems want to lose. They are paid to lose. When Biden loses in November, it is going to fuel a monumental fundraising campaign. Don't fall for it. Vote socialist. Thank you for that. My comrade JB says the landlord and utility companies don't care if you're grieving. They want their money. Bingo. That is true. Thanks, Cool Blue. Obama engineered Biden's 2020 Dem nomination happen by calling Klobuchar and Buttigieg and telling them to drop out and endorse Biden. Yes, he did. Let's all remember, you got to point fingers here at Barack Obama as well. Let's all remember, they got exactly what they wanted. Thank you, Chris O. Don't fall for it, Sabby. Morning Joe is propaganda and wouldn't have a segment like this unless the establishment was prepping to retire Joe favorably and replace him with another status puppet. Thank you, Mindy. I've seen this in my family. He is close to that last stage of Alzheimer's. Thank you, Sabby. We appreciate your honesty and excellent journalism. Thank you, Mindy. Tia, I have a friend who has dementia. It is sad that they don't know what is happening it's sad that they know what's happening to him. Biden and his entourage know what is going on. Exactly. Z Manny says, watch free and equal elections to see more legitimate and genuine debates. Yes, there's another third party independent debate that is happening in July. I'll be sure to promote that. And Lauren says, thanks, Obama. Oh, bummer. Let's get the comment on Rumble. Thank you. All right. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Olay. With barbecue season on, remember, kids, stay safe and keep away from the potato salad. Yes. And you can't eat everyone's potato salad. You just can't. I like to try to be nice. Someone brings food to a barbecue, it is welcomed. But I just stay away from a certain one, and that is potato salad. I'm very particular about this. It either has to be made by my mom, it had to be made by my grandparents, maybe some of my aunts. I don't even want to make my own potato salad. It's just the reality. But I made that mistake a long time ago. I took a chance. I was very brave, and I decided to eat someone else's potato salad, and I never got that taste out of my mouth. There are certain times of the day I just sit at the table and sit down to eat something, and it's like I can taste it all over again. To never have potato salad with just a clunk of mayo, and I'm like, the potato salad is supposed to have flavor. It's not a mayo salad. You live and you learn. You live and you learn. All right. We are going on to the next one. I'm in a silly mood tonight. Thank you for the super chat, Cool Blue. Which dim-witted Democratic politician who wants to be U.S. president someday would want to replace Biden in this year's election environment? I can't think of one. Yes, I am. Lance said she's legitimately traumatized by that bad potato salad. It was a taste like no other. Okay. And I've had German potato salad, which is different. German potato salad is warm, but it's still good. But that's like its own thing, right? Okay. But like, I just, I try. All right. And speaking of trying, this ruling from the Supreme Court about Donald Trump has people in their feelings. And I really want to get into more details about this and what this could mean, because this ruling from SCOTUS isn't just applied to Donald Trump. This is a foreshadowing of what is going to happen down the line for other presidential candidates as well. Now, I want you to think about something as we go into the story. Do you agree with the SCOTUS ruling about giving Trump immunity over some acts? And I keep saying some because it wasn't all. We'll get into that. Or do you feel that this could become political? And that's what I want you to think about for just a second. We're going to start with this clip here from CNN, getting right into the SCOTUS ruling that Trump has immunity from official acts. So we have to pay attention to the vocabulary here. Let's dive in.
The Supreme Court has finally released its ruling on this long awaited case, saying that Trump has immunity from official acts. In several cases, they cite what official acts may be, but they also leave a number of others open for lower courts to make a final determination on. We're going to be talking a lot about the legal implications of all this. I want to first bring in CNN's Van Jones and Scott Jennings. Van, as you look at this, what stands out to you?
Well, it's a very concerning outcome. You know, there's a maxim that says in law, bad facts create bad law. So when you have somebody doing stuff that's so terrible, the stuff that Trump did in office, it creates these bad facts. The court has to come in and figure out what to do about it. It often creates bad law. Basically, the question is, Supreme Court, do you more care about the unlawful conduct of a sitting president or possibly the unfair prosecution of a former president? That's really what they had to balance. They're obviously more concerned about the latter. And so I think politically, it's bad. It makes the Supreme Court look very partisan. They're supposed to be wearing these kind of black and white umpire jerseys or whatever. They look like they're wearing red jerseys or even MAGA hats. It's going to go down bad politically for the Supreme Court.
Pause. So here's the thing about the Supreme Court being partisan. I don't remember the Supreme Court not being partisan, not in my adult life. As long as I can remember, the Supreme Court has always been partisan. So when Van Jones says it makes the Supreme Court look partisan, I don't remember them not being partisan. We've been saying for since Trump's presidency, that it's a conservative Supreme Court. We've talked about this before. We talked about the importance of having RBG step down so that Barack Obama could appoint a justice in her seat. We've talked about that before. So we have known for years that the Supreme Court is partisan. I don't understand why Van Jones is saying it now, that it makes the Supreme Court look like it's partisan now, when we have seen this for quite some time.
It's also scary because what is Trump going to do if Trump gets elected? And there's this idea that he can get away with even more stuff. That's really, really scary for the public because he already ran over every norm that he could. So it seems like, I'm just looking at this politically, not legally, politically, it's almost like a license to thug in a way. Like, you can do whatever you want, and the Supreme Court is probably going to let you get away with it. That is very frightening in this case. And so I'm very, very concerned.
Pause. So this whole thing about the Supreme Court letting the president get away with what they want, I think we need to reframe this. Number one, there is an impeachment process, and it's there for a reason. So if Donald Trump is elected and representatives feel that he is behaving or acting in a way that is not suitable for a president to behave, they can always file impeachment papers. They can always file that. That is what impeachment is there for. But this idea that the Supreme Court should just be able to come in and tell the president whether or not they can be immune or not, I think that's a dangerous thing, because let's flip the people. Let's pretend it wasn't Donald Trump. Let's pretend it was Joe Biden. It's a conservative court. Would they have ruled the same if it was Joe Biden and not Donald Trump? So what you end up happening is that this makes it more political. And that's what I want people to really focus on about this particular ruling. It makes it political because now the Supreme Court is going to obviously side with their party. So in reference to holding the president accountable, unfortunately, at this point in time, what we do have in place is the impeachment process. It is not perfect, but that is what Congress is there for. They're supposed to be the ones to bring that forward, which they could still do if Donald Trump were to win. And I want you to think about this as well. If it happened to be Joe Biden, would Van Jones and Anderson Cooper be upset about the ruling if it was Joe Biden? Something to think about.
Scott Jennings, Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, essentially makes that argument, saying the main takeaway of today's decision is that all of a president's official acts defined without regard to motive or intent are entitled to immunity that is at least presumptive and quite possibly absolute.
Yeah, look, I think there's some amount of overreaction here. I mean, after all, they did kick it back down to the lower court, so some decisions could be made about differentiating between official and private acts. But look, this court has stood up for the office of the presidency and the executive power of the presidency in a way that, may be of some benefit to future presidents. I mean, we're looking at this through the lens of Donald Trump, but, the President of the United States has a lot of power for a reason. And they do take a lot of official actions. And I think about a future where, if it was open season on presidents for time immemorial, what action would any president ever take out of fear of being dragged into a courtroom every time they did it? So I hear Van, and I think there's interesting arguments on both sides of this today. I've listened to some of arguments like what Van has made. But at the same time, I do think the office deserves a lot of protection and a lot of deference because of the special place that it holds in our system. So I'm okay with it, especially because I think a lower court may have decisions to make in the future, of course, depending on the outcome of the election in November.
But Van, just to be clear, even if a lower court makes a ruling, then that can, because what the Supreme Court says is that can be appealed ultimately back to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, look, I think the Supreme Court is really hurting itself here. I mean, I think most Americans on either side would have preferred us getting some kind of finality around these cases. And what you see is the Supreme Court just dragging this out and dragging this out. They could have weighed in on all this stuff back in March and cleared the decks on this one way or the other. They didn't. They say, go through the whole process and you come back up here. Then they wait 60 plus days past the buzzer to give us this decision. The way it's structured, this thing is going to ping pong back and forth for 3 or 4 more years, maybe. It seems like they're doing Donald Trump a favor when they don't have to. The ruling does seem to be much more concerned about unleashing the presidency than constraining the presidency. That's fine, except that there's a different balance here. Now you're concerned about a renegade president. Are you concerned about a renegade president prosecuting someone unfairly after the fact or acting like a rogue or a thug in office? It's not clear what's the greater threat to the republic, and it doesn't seem like the majority really has taken as seriously the concern of half the country about renegade presidency in the office. I think the Supreme Court is hurting itself. There was, I believe, a way to come to a better outcome, a quicker outcome, an outcome that better balances the interests here. What I think people are going to take away from this, Donald Trump has a Supreme Court that will let him do whatever he wants to, and that is terrifying.
Anderson, if I may,
let me pause here for just a second. So again, I think what Van Jones is forgetting or omitting is that we have an impeachment process. That is where Congress is supposed to make the right decision here and bring forth impeachment. And it's been done before. This isn't new. I mean, think about Bill Clinton. How many of you were around during the Bill Clinton days and the Monica Lewinsky and all that jazz, right? What happened? Impeachment was filed. Now, impeachment doesn't mean that you are removed from office, but it's a first step to try to remove a president from office. So what I worry about with the Supreme Court here with this particular case, you have to think about this as a nonpartisan thing. So if you hate Trump, it's going to be easy to say, this is ridiculous, this isn't right. If you like Trump, it's going to be easier for you to say, hell yeah, this is great for Trump. But I want you to pretend it's not Donald Trump, because this really can set a precedent for other presidents in the future. So that's how I want you to think about it. Does the Supreme Court have, or should they have, that authority to make these decisions about a sitting president? And the reality is, a sitting president or former president or a president that's trying to run for presidency again. But the reality is, at the end of the day, I feel like we are heading down a dangerous path in this country. I feel like there's too much power being concentrated in one area. And so much to the point that now you'll start to notice the Supreme Court is actually starting to throw things back to the lower courts, bringing things back to the states. We'll get into that in just a second. But I want people to not look at this as a partisan way. Just pretend it's not Donald Trump. Just pretend it's someone named Rogue or something like that. And think about how it will be applied in the future. So that's what I want people to focus on. And that can kind of be hard to do, right? Now, someone did do that, though. Someone did do that. Oh, do I want to get to that one yet? Do I want to get to Jonathan's article? Yeah, let's go to Jonathan's article first. Jonathan Turley. I want to bring up this article here by him because Jonathan Turley is not a Trump supporter. He's a legal expert. He did not support Trump, but apparently, so, you know, like I guess the MAGA people don't really like him, but at the same time, liberals are also mad at him. So he's just not in a happy space between both parties. I guess you would say he's kind of in the middle. And you may have seen him before, but let's break this down because President Joe Biden said that the Supreme Court basically removed all limits or whatever. And Jonathan Turley is going to explain to you that is not actually the case. No, President Biden, the Supreme Court did not remove all limits on the presidency. See, I saw a number of people get this wrong the other day. So let's get into this here. President Biden delivered an address from the White House last night on presidential immunity decision by the Supreme Court, while pledging that he will defend the rule of law. President Biden misrepresented what that law is in the aftermath of Trump versus the U.S. While we have often discussed false constitutional claims by the president, as well as other false statements, an address of this kind is particularly concerning and misleading citizens. Let's get to this part here. Okay. This was the statement from Biden. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what the president can do. That is not true. The court found that there was absolute immunity for actions that fall within their exclusive sphere of constitutional authority, while they enjoy presumptive immunity for other official acts. They do not enjoy immunity for unofficial or private actions. That's why I said we have to pay attention to the vocabulary. That's important. The court has often adopted tiered approaches in balancing the powers of branches. He gives an example there. We ain't gonna get into all of that. But it says the court separated cases into actions taken in core areas of effective authority, official actions taken outside those core areas, and unofficial actions. Actions deemed personal or unofficial are not protected under this ruling. It is certainly true that the case affords considerable immunity, including for conversations with subordinates. Let me go down here. President Biden's hyperventilated response is crushingly ironic. He was vice president when Obama killed an American citizen without a trial or a charge. When former Attorney General Eric Holder announced the kill list policy, he was met with applause, not condemnation. The Biden-Obama administration then fought every effort by the family to sue the government. President Biden would have been outraged by any attempt of a Republican district attorney to charge him or Obama with murder. He also would be outraged by prosecutors pursuing criminal charges for the death associated with the deluge of undocumented persons over the southern border. In his address, President Biden also claimed that the law would no longer define the limits of the presidency. This is also untrue. This case was remanded for the purpose of defining what of these functions would be deemed private as opposed to official. Even on official actions, former President Donald Trump could be prosecuted if the presumptive immunity is rebutted by prosecutors. So does everybody see this part here? We're going to highlight it because there was a narrative that went around the other day where people were saying that he was immune from everything. He's not immune from all actions. So when it comes to official actions, he can still be prosecuted. Let's go on. What was most glaring for many civil libertarians was President Biden's portrayal of himself as a paragon of constitutional fealty. He declared that I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers as I have for the last 3.5 years. That was also untrue. President Biden has racked up an impressive array of losses in federal courts where he was found to have violated the Constitution. This includes rulings that his administration has exceeded his authority and engaged in racial discrimination in federal programs. Indeed, Biden has often displayed a cavalier attitude towards such violations. Let's go forward here. While some of us have challenged these predictions, the other presidential candidates are missing a far more compelling argument going into this election. While democracy is not on the ballot this election, free speech is. I thought that was an important part that he said there. So this is coming from Jonathan Turley. Again, some people think he's Republican. Jonathan Turley said he did not support Donald Trump and he doesn't support Donald Trump now. So it's kind of like, it's interesting. He's had both sides mad at him. I guess he's kind of a little bit more in the middle. So I think that's important for people to fully understand. So again, Trump has not received full immunity for all of these acts. Now, let's talk about possible solutions when it comes to the Supreme Court, because one of the things that has been proposed multiple times is the idea of expanding the Supreme Court or term limits, damn it. Now, some of you I know don't agree with expanding the Supreme Court, but how about term limits? Because think about it this way. Supreme Court justices are granted a lifetime appointment. Are you given a lifetime appointment at your job? You can lose your job tomorrow. Most people do not have a lifetime appointment. But when it comes to the Supreme Court justices, they are given a lifetime appointment. I have never agreed with that. I've always thought that that should not be the case. So term limits could be a way to change this. And maybe not just with the Supreme Court, but with Congress as well, damn it. Let's think about it, okay? But Joe Biden's against reforming the Supreme Court. So as much as Joe Biden gave that speech and he complained about what has happened with Donald Trump and the immunity, Joe Biden doesn't want to prevent this from happening in the future, because peep this, ma'am. Now, Rolling Stone released this yesterday. Biden campaign brushes off the idea of reforming the Supreme Court. Now, you think about all the things that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Biden administration have complained about that the Supreme Court has passed, in particular, removing Roe v. Wade and putting that back to the states, right? You would think that while he is in that position of power, he would try to reform the Supreme Court. Why doesn't he want to do that? This is why I call the bluff, guys. If you're in that position where you can do that, why do you not want to do that? Don't want to get rid of the lifetime appointments? Don't want to expand the court? So you're not really trying to make a change here when it comes to the Supreme Court. And I'll just read a little bit of this here. It says here, he could issue an edict that all digital or physical evidence of his debate performance last week be destroyed, or he could just use this chilling partisan decision, that latest 6-3 ruling in a term that was characterized by a staggering number of them, as an opportunity to finally embrace the movement to reform the Supreme Court. But Biden is not planning to do any of that. Shortly after SCOTUS delivered its decision on Trump versus the U.S. Biden campaign held a press call with surrogates. And it goes on to say here, their message was simple. It's terrifying to contemplate what Donald Trump might do with these powers if he's reelected. We have to do everything in our power to stop him, everything that is, except to take material action to rein in the increasingly lawless and openly right-wing Supreme Court. So again, if Joe Biden were serious, this is something that he could do. And I don't see what would be wrong with that. I mean, come on, like I said, you don't get a lifetime appointment for other jobs. Either expand the Supreme Court or remove the lifetime appointments. You got to do something here. But he doesn't want to because Joe Biden is not serious. Now, I want to remind you of something because I have not forgotten about this. When you think about how conservative the Supreme Court is, and when you think about some of the decisions, some of the rulings that the Supreme Court has made, in particular in the past week or so, and also going back to the Roe v. Wade decision, I just want to remind you of something. Not all of those justices that are there were appointed by Donald Trump. Not all the conservative justices. Because there's one justice, Clarence Thomas, that I strongly feel would not have been there had it not been for Joe Biden. And I want to remind you of this. As you hear SCOTUS rulings this week, don't forget that Clarence Thomas probably wouldn't be there if Biden would have allowed Anita Hill's witnesses to testify. Don't forget about that, ladies and gentlemen. Because see, some people do, and I don't. Let's all remember, let's go back to when Biden was Senator Biden. Anita Hill had evidence against Clarence Thomas. She also had witnesses that were willing to testify against Clarence Thomas. Senator Biden at that point in time was the chairman of the committee. He was the one that refused to allow her witnesses to testify. And if that would have happened, who knows where we would be today? And I'm willing to bet that if those witnesses would have been heard, if they would have been allowed to testify, I'm willing to bet that Clarence Thomas would not be sitting on the Supreme Court. So one of those conservative justices, you have Joe Biden to thank for that. Then what made it really sad is when he was running for president in 2020, he had to make a phone call to Anita Hill and ask for her support. Ain't that some shit? Isn't that a way to just wag your tail in between? You just had to go back to the person that you disrespected during that time. And if you go back and you watch the video footage, Joe Biden was completely nasty towards Anita Hill. Let's remember that. So I always like to bring that up. We will have to see what happens with the Trump situation, but I don't want us to be distracted. I don't want us to just be focused on it's Donald Trump, so he has to go down. I want you to think about how this is going to affect other presidents in the future. I personally don't think the Supreme Court should be involved with the president in this way. I think it will be very political. I think that is not going to be fair. Not as that we have a fair justice system anyway, but who is going to hold the president accountable? We have to start thinking about that. The country's a mess. And something else as well. What has been happening with the Supreme Court, I hope this is going to push people to pay closer attention to what's happening in your state at the lower courts. And I bring this up because when we covered the story about SCOTUS, that they decided to agree with the Biden administration that the government has a right to tell social media companies what they can and cannot do or post or whatever, takes you back to the Twitter files. Well, there's an update about that particular story, which is that now the Supreme Court has decided that those two particular social media cases that they had that were brought forth to the Supreme Court, they decided to throw it back to the states. And I'll show you an example here. It says state laws on social media moderation are too vague, Supreme Court says. But then it says here, the Supreme Court is pushing back to lower courts two key cases looking how social media companies moderate content on their platforms and how states respond to it. Now that's Texas and Florida, those particular cases there. But I hope what this is going to push people to do is to pay attention to what is happening in your state. I know it's not sexy. Okay, I know it's not an attractive topic. A lot of people focus on what's happening on the federal level and they're not paying attention to what's happening on the local level. But notice the trend that is happening. Roe v. Wade was overturned and the Supreme Court pushed it back to the states. This social media case from Texas and Florida, the Supreme Court pushed it back to the states. And I think you're going to see this happen more and more. And what that means is that you're going to have to start paying attention to what's happening in your state. This is why I talk about the ballot measures and the ballot initiatives. This is why I cover some of the local stories, because although you may not live in that city where it's happening or that state where it's happening, it could be coming to your state. And then I hope what this will sincerely do is to motivate people to organize locally in your state to get things done. Again, not pretty, not attractive. It isn't. But that is where I feel like that's an untapped resource for a lot of people. A lot of people put their hope in electoral politics on the national level. How many people know who their city councilors are? How many people go to the meetings that their mayors have or the city council meetings in the evening? How many people know who is actually representing them on a local level? So hopefully this will push people to organize more in the states on the local level, which is something that I do. I think you're going to see more and more of this. Let's go to some of the comments here. Soccer Papa, Sabby, do you eat muffins anymore or do they give you PTSD? I do not really eat muffins. I'm not a muffin person. Crystal, no president is ever held accountable for their crimes. Spiro Agnew, Spiro Agnew, I think he was in trouble for tax evasion, but you're right. Even Nixon didn't go to jail for like Watergate or anything like that. Grapentine, anyone ever have corporate potato salad? It will turn you into a mutant. No, I did not. It didn't look good either. Katrina, we need term limits for these damn judges, Sabby. Yes, we do. We do. Les says, not really, because 9-0 and other decisions do not bear out always partisan. But this particular situation deals with the president, though. So think about this. I mean, obviously, the ones that were appointed by Donald Trump are not going to vote against Donald Trump. Something to think about. Like Kavanaugh, that was under Donald Trump. And Amy Coney Barrett was also under Donald Trump. They're not going to vote against him. Sharon, don't forget that justices have been accepting gifts. Thank you, Courtney. Van Jones is so phony. SMH. Thank you, Janine. Impeachment isn't the same as charging a president with criminal or civil charges. That's true. That's the concern. It makes them above the law. I guess we have to start answering this question. Who is going to hold the president accountable legally? Thank you, Roger. Today marks 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. Awesome. Sander Days. Did Sabby cover the big pharma opioid case ruling from the Supreme Court? That is Thursday. Because I've been covering so many Supreme Court cases over the past couple of days. I'm like, good God, but that one will be Thursday. I have that one on there as well. All right, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we are moving on to the cost of living. Ladies and gentlemen, can you afford to live in your state? Maybe you think you can. Maybe you know that you can't. Every year, the Out of Reach High Cost of Housing report is released in July. That new report is here. I'm going to focus on 4 states in particular, and Eric will put the link in the chat so you can see more of this information about your own area here. But this is what it looks like. It is the National Low Income Housing Coalition Out of Reach report. This is the report for 2024. And I just want to show you, this report will tell you how much you need to make an hourly wage to live in a 2-bedroom rental according to your state. We will hover over a few. California is number 1. It is the highest housing wage. You need to make $47.38 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in California. All right. We're not going to hover over the other ones that I'm going to go into detail with because I have screenshots of those. But there's a couple of other ones that you may kind of be surprised by. Texas, for example, is ranked 23rd highest housing wage. You need to make $27.88 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Texas. Now, it'll also tell you minimum wage. If you make minimum wage in Texas, you need to work 154 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. There's a couple of other ones I want to hover over before we get to the detailed states. Another one that I want to bring to your attention is Arizona. Arizona is 14th. You need to make $32.70 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home in Arizona. Now, what's interesting about this is it's easy to look at this map and to say, well, all of the expensive states are going to be the blue states. Not necessarily. Arizona, are we calling Arizona purple now? Is that what we're doing? Is it purple? Okay, whatever. But it was red before the Biden election. I think it will eventually turn back red. But Arizona, again, that's another example of a state that's not a Democrat state. It's not a blue state. It's still in the top 20. Another one I want to hover over is Maryland. Where did we go? Maryland's always hard to get to because it's like right in the cut. Maryland. Maryland is 9th. It's in the top 10. You'll have to make $36.70 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in the state of Maryland. Florida is one of the other ones, so I want to get to that one. Some of the lower costing states, Missouri, where you need to make $20.83 an hour. Someone mentioned Louisiana in the chat. I'll hover over that one really quick. It's 33rd. You need to make $22.11 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. Louisiana. Another one I want to skim over is Colorado. Pay attention to what's happening in Colorado, right? So Colorado is ranked 8th. You'll have to make $37.47 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Colorado. Why has Colorado become so much more expensive? What has happened to Colorado over the years? You've got to pay attention to what's happening, folks, because I feel like as Biden is telling you that the economy is doing great, this report is going to show you that that is not the case. And I talk about the housing situation. I talk about this a lot because if this is not fixed, something is going to happen. And we'll do one more. Let's go to Michigan. Michigan, 31st. you need to make $23.16 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom in Michigan. Eric, when you get a chance, you can put the link to this in the chat and they can check out their own. Now we're going to go on to salaries. And this is the part that I think is going to stun some people. This is the income that an individual needs to live comfortably in the United States. Note the word comfortably, not poor, not broke, not struggling. Let's go on. Soccer Popper, we're going to get to the cities in just a second. We're going to get there. Okay. Here's the salaries to live comfortable in that state. This is wild, fam. So the highest salaries are dark brown. The lowest salary is a pale yellow. So peep this, fam. Washington State, you need to make over $106K. California, $114K. Arizona, $97K. Remember the word comfortable. Not struggling. Okay, not struggle. Let's hop around. Texas, $87,000 a year. Kansas, $85,000 a year. Isn't this insane? North Dakota, $81,000 a year. Of course, we're going to hop over to the darker ones here. New York, $112K. Massachusetts, $116K. And I live here and I can tell you that's about right. That is about right, fam. Maine, $92K. Part of the problem that you run into with Maine is that there aren't a lot of high-paying jobs in Maine. That's part of the problem you're going to run into there, especially if you're not in Portland. Also, Pennsylvania, $91,000. North Carolina, $90,000. I was looking up homes for someone. I looked up homes in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's insane how much a house costs in Raleigh, North Carolina now. This used to be the cheaper place to move to, fam. People used to move from New York to North Carolina and to Florida. Florida, $93,000. Georgia, $97,000. South Carolina, $88,000. The lowest is West Virginia, which is $79,000 a year. That's the lowest. So for all the people who live in the United States that are making like $40,000, $50,000 a year, you are not making enough to live in the United States. I am sorry, Natalie. I hear you, fam. This is the thing that people need to see these numbers. People need to see this. And this is how you push back on the politicians that tell you Joe Biden's done all these great things and Guys, fam, this has not changed. This has not, decreased. This has increased over the years. This is why you're not getting ahead. Hawaii, I forgot, sorry, $114K. Now, let's go to the metropolitan areas. We're looking at 4 states in particular, the highest and one of the low territories. So first, we're going to go to California, because what I think you're going to find interesting, even though California says you need to make $47.38 an hour, it turns out that when you look at the most expensive areas, you need to make more than that. So let's pop down here. The most expensive areas, which is circled in red, Santa Cruz, Watsonville, MSA, you need to make $77.96 an hour. $77.96 an hour in Santa Cruz. Let's go on. San Francisco, $64.60. San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, $60.23 an hour. That's Ro Khanna's area, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that Ro Khanna's area? You see this? Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, $57.58. And Salinas, which I don't know what the hell that is, but Salinas is $55.37. So you can't just go by that $47. That is the average. However, the most expensive areas, that you got to focus on that because there's a lot of jobs in this area. Now we're looking at the tech bubble, right? So you see how the tech bubble has priced people out in the Bay? If any of you live in the Bay, you know what I'm talking about. The Bay. That's California, 2024. The next one that we're going to look at, which is the second highest this year, is Massachusetts. Massachusetts is number 2 as the highest. I live here. I agree with everything that's said on this screenshot. In Massachusetts, you need to make $44.84 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom. However, once again, let's look at the most expensive areas. Boston, Cambridge, and Quincy, you need to make $54.37 an hour. The reality is, folks, that's where most of the jobs are. That is why there's so much traffic going into Boston. Nantucket County, $48.58. Easton, Raynham, you need to make $48. Dukes County, $41. And Barnstable Town, $40. Most people live in the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area. So what happens, folks, is you have these cities where most of the jobs, let's not say all, most of the jobs are concentrated in a dense area, and people want to live closer to their work. The rent is going to increase because the demand is high. But on top of that, real estate developers have bought so many of these apartment buildings and they have increased the rent. And if you don't have rent stability, or if you don't have rent control, they can run amok. I told you, it's insane. If you didn't get out during the pandemic, it's kind of hard to get out. That's Massachusetts, number 2. Number 3 is New York. Yes, Massachusetts is more expensive than New York now. In New York, you need to make $44.77 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. New York, the state becomes expensive as a whole. They get this per hour rate because of New York City. If you were to remove New York City from New York State, this would drop significantly. If we look at the most expensive areas, I think you all know, New York, $52.92 you need to make. Nassau, Suffolk, $48.23 an hour. Westchester County statutory exception area, $45.23 an hour. Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, Middletown, $35.10 an hour. Kingston, $32.73 an hour. That's New York, the state. They are number 3. Now, those are the top 3. And I threw one in because I've been watching this one for quite some time. And I think if any of you are from this state, you already know this is happening. But we need to keep an eye on Florida. This is Ron DeSantis' state. Florida is a red state. I'm telling you, it's not just the states that are blue. Because Florida is ranked number 10. This used to be the place that a lot of people moved to. New Yorkers, Bostonians would move to Florida because it was cheaper to live there and they don't have to deal with the property taxes. But that is changing. In Florida, you need to make $35.24 per hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. And remember, fam, this refers to rentals, not buying a house. The most expensive areas, Miami Beach, Kendall, you need to make $44.69 an hour. West Palm Beach, Boca Raton, you need to make $42.81 an hour. Monroe County, $41.13 an hour. Fort Lauderdale, $40.42. Orlando, Kissimmee, Sanford, $35.71 an hour. And Orlando is probably on that list because of Disney World. So that's right, Hector. Hector said Florida is getting expensive. You got that right. So does everyone see how this is changing over time? So what this shows you is that the solution is not to move somewhere else, because once more people start to do that, that state will also become expensive because the demand is increasing. This is how this is happening. And then we're going to look at one that is the cheapest, and that is Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is number 52. In Puerto Rico, you need to make $11.58 an hour. Even in Puerto Rico, you need to make more than the federal minimum wage. Most expensive areas in Puerto Rico, San Juan, $12.85 an hour. Farado, $11.85 an hour. Mayaguez, $10.23. Barranquitas, $10.12, and Ponce, $9.40 an hour for 2-bedroom rentals. That is Puerto Rico. Someone was asking what was number 4. Number 4 was Washington State was 5th. I thought it was. Sorry, guys. I thought I had it written down. Damn you, Connecticut, you always in the way. Whether I'm trying to go to New York or get back home, even on this map, move. Sorry, guys. I have a bone to pick. I have a bone to pick with Connecticut, among other things. 4th was, why did I forget? Was it Hawaii? Hawaii, yeah. 4th was Hawaii. You need to make $44.60 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Hawaii. Oh my God. So yes. Now we're going to show you something else, because if we look at 2024 and we compare it to 2023, you will see there has been an increase. 2023, when we looked at the most expensive jurisdictions, and you can see here, sorry guys, it's tiny. So when I scoot it over, Santa Cruz was the most expensive metropolitan area in the US. You needed to make at least $63, right? San Francisco, 61, San Jose, Sunnyvale, 56, Salinas, 51, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, 50, and you can go on. And then there's Boston, Cambridge there. But now, when you look at the most expensive jurisdictions for 2024, what you'll see, I'm trying to just scoot this over a little bit. When it comes to Santa Cruz, I do have to shrink it smaller. I'm sorry, guys. Santa Cruz is now $77. So we went from 2023, Santa Cruz, $63 to 2024, Santa Cruz, $77.96 an hour. So as I've been trying to explain, it is continuing to increase. It is not decreasing. It is also not remaining idle. So if this is you and you live in any one of these areas, for those of you just joining, this is the salary that you need to make to have a comfortable living in your state. And I hope more people discuss this. I hope more people talk about this on their show, just because I'm sorry, but the Biden administration needs to be called out about the economy. And no, it didn't start under Joe Biden. but it has continued to increase over the years. I don't even think we ever fully recovered from the '08 housing crisis. I don't care what some of these economic peeps tell you. I never believed we fully recovered from that. And here we are now. So I'm going to make a prediction. Based on what I've seen from this report, I'm willing to predict that, say, in the next 10 years, might be sooner than that, but I'm going to be more adventurous. The only way that this is going to change is that you have to break it. And I don't think that this is going to break until the system tanks. What that means is, I think that all of this is going to have to bottom out before people come forward and make strong, serious demands and say, F that, we're breaking this system. I think we're going to have to hit rock bottom before that happens. Now, I don't want you to be down and out because I do have another prediction about this. Who can break this? I think we really need to pay attention on what's happening with younger millennials and Gen Z. I think that they are going to be the ones to break this system. How are they going to do that? I predict within the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to see more Americans become expats. I think that more Americans, particularly those generations, especially if they don't have kids and they're single, I think you're going to see more people leave the United States and live in other countries that have more benefits and that are more affordable to live. Whether that's Singapore, whether it's Denmark, whether it's Japan, whether it's China. It has been happening for years, but I think it is going to drastically increase. I think you're going to see a lot of these younger people that are graduating from college choosing to leave the United States and to live abroad because they can afford to live there and they don't want to end up in debt. I also think part of this is going to have to do with the job market. As I predict going forward, a lot of these fields that these kids are in right now, by the time they graduate, these jobs will not be plentiful. That happened to my generation. That happened to, I think Gen X too. Some of that happened to you, but that happened to my generation, the millennial generation. If they can't get the jobs that they need to pay the rent, they are going to go somewhere else. And I think it will be only then that the housing bubble will find a way to fix itself, because as long as people are paying it, it's not going to change. And I want to say this again, folks, as long as people are willing to pay $3,000 or $4,000 a month for an apartment, the housing system is not going to change. If you stop paying it, that is how it's going to have to tank. That sucks. It's sad. But the reality is, this is why gentrification has been able to take hold the way that it has. As long as you have people that are willing to pay $4,000 for an apartment in Harvard Square, the landlords are never going to decrease the rent. When I think about what's happening globally, what's happening with BRICS, all of these other countries signing up to join BRICS or applying to join BRICS and try to create a multipolar world, those are the countries that I think some of the younger people are going to be moving to. The Brazils, Russia, India, China. Some people already moved there. But my prediction, if that this continues the way that it is, this is all going to bottom out. We cannot continue to have the housing prices continue to increase and the rents continue to increase while the pay and the salary is still relatively low for a lot of working class people. This system will not last. It's just a matter of when it is going to break. So we will look forward to the younger people because I think they're really going to be the ones to disrupt it, especially if they don't have kids, they don't have a family, they don't have as much to lose. It will get worse before it gets better. So when all the people who say pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, the bootstrap people, you no longer have boots and straps, fam. And if you didn't come from wealth, it could be coming your way too. None of us have a job that is promised tomorrow unless you're a Supreme Court judge, unless you're SCOTUS. But none of us have a job that is promised tomorrow, whether you signed a contract or not. So when I look at the way that the youth, they're out there in the streets and they're pressing back and they're like, hell no, man, we're not going to take this. That is why my hope lies in them, that they will be the ones that say, F this, fam. Why do you think there's a whole, what is it? The minimalist movement, that whole wave that started because young people don't want to pay for things they don't need anymore because most of their money is going to rent. But once we have a set of hardcore demands, and once people are willing to get out in the streets over it, which is not always easy to do because people working, let's keep it real. We can get there. But I think the younger people, particularly those that are college students or those that just graduated from college, they have a lot more time to get out in the streets than those of us that work do. So I think it's going to come from them. I really do. Let's go ahead and get that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Computer love. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp car. MLK nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for the Nobel Peace Prize. He silently marched on DC before the Iraq War. MLK was trying to occupy DC. If Brand, Dorr, Rogan, and Jones set a date, we'd have the numbers. We could agree to audit the Fed and do and split our money back 50-50 left and right. Thank you, Roger. Florida, like Washington, New Hampshire, Tennessee, Texas, Alaska, South Dakota, Nevada, and Wyoming doesn't have a state income tax, but property tax was always high to make up for the lost revenue because municipalities can't rely on the state for revenue, so they must generate their own. That's why those states have higher local taxes and more out-of-pocket fees. Sabs, show how much those states were during Biden's tenure. Compare the years for Massachusetts. Yeah, I did 2023. I can't go all the way back because we got this stuff set up, but I did do 2023. Thank you for this as well. You know, they broke it during the lockdowns. People left the cities, but soon as they saw a little bit of a deal, they all come running back, taking short-term leases. Learn to withhold, damn it, until you get a better deal. Yeah, I will say that people did come back too soon. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Radicles. I lived in Maryland my whole life, had to move to country-ass West Virginia to afford rent. Now I'm barely getting by with a 2-bedroom after 5 years with the Postal Service, SMH. Very well said. All right, guys, go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we will do call in after the show tonight. Eric, go ahead and bring up the third part of the VNC, and we'll go ahead and get into the final story, ladies and gentlemen. Chelsea said, Sabby is right. We have to pay attention to our states, but it's exhausting in deep red states. After living and battling Texas on healthcare, a Bobo education for 35 years, I had to get the fuck out. Much happier in Massachusetts. What's up, Chelsea? What's up, fam? Casey says, we haven't recovered from 1930. Aunt Shawnee TV, they are literally pricing us out. Yes, they are. Patrick Shaw, just make Connecticut, Massachusetts, or New York fake ass state. Foster, get your passport now, folks. I'm telling you. Sir Bikes a lot. Please confirm Japan is issuing visas for procreation. I'm bringing it up because of what you're saying about moving abroad. I will have to look into that. I'm not sure about that, but I'll have to check that. Thank you, M. Smith. I'm a millennial and I've been planning an escape for years now. The problem is finding work overseas. Not easy. That is true. You're correct about that. Lawrence says the system has failed. Bryce, I have to pay $4K. I'm getting an OnlyFans FML. Jesus Christ, Bryce, aren't you in Vegas? Thank you, John. Florida passed unauthorized public camping and sleeping. Everybody see it happening now? Thank you, Chris. This young generation being a new leader is them on TikTok and actually seeing the world and being like, hey, this country has this. Why can't we? And thank you, Roger. Move to North Dakota. North Dakota, a friend of mine went to work there years ago, and he told me that North Dakota had more jobs than people. He meant that. He said he made a lot of money in North Dakota and then he moved back to North Carolina. All right. We are going on to our final story. This one's a little bit different compared to the other ones, but if you have not seen this, Kim Iversen and Brianna Joy Gray had sort of a debate discussion this week where they are talking about should everybody coalesce around RFK Jr. in order to break the duopoly. I have great respect for both of them. I cringed a little bit during this discussion because Kim was recently on this show and she said one thing here and now she's saying something different. I don't know what is happening, but somebody got a hold of Kim. Kim, come back. Kim, come back. Somebody got to Kim. I don't know what's going on. Let's get into the conversation. Here we go, folks. Kim is making the argument for. She's saying that we should all coalesce behind RFK. Listen to this.
Of Jews, he spews very much the Zionist pro-Israel talking points that we see circulating all throughout social media without actually, it's like without actually doing the research and looking at the data and instead just spewing the talking points that he's just been fed. But I don't know, at the end of the day, for example, in March, he did a podcast where he had a pro-Palestinian person and a pro-Israel person. Excuse me. He had back in March a podcast with a pro-Palestinian and a pro-Israel person, and he kind of moderated the discussion and had them actually have a very productive conversation. And he was willing to have that conversation. I think he's willing. I think, what I've kind of deduced from watching him in the debate was he definitely will spew the Israeli talking points. I'm uncomfortable with that, but I don't think he's willing to go along. It doesn't sound like he would sign off on 2,000-pound bombs or sign off on tons of weapons to Israel. I do think he would say, let's try to use diplomacy and talk this out.
Kim, even with the example you're describing, Joe Biden, who is the one administering the current genocide that's happening right now, also is not signing off on 2,000-pound bombs. To be clear, 2,000-pound bombs have already devastated Gaza, right? So what? RFK Jr. is going to be equally as genocidal as Joe Biden? That's not exactly a relief.
I think he'd be less. I think it wouldn't be. I don't think any of the three. Well, I just think from the fact that he says that he would, for one, his stance on Ukraine and Russia, that war.
Pause right there. So I don't know who got to Kim. I really don't, because I don't understand why we're talking about who will be less genocidal. Like, genocide is genocide. And I personally am not supporting anybody that is not willing to understand that the Palestinian people need to be treated as equals and need to have self-determination. And I'm not voting for anybody that is willing to give Israel any more weapons, period. And RFK Jr. is willing to do that. So him and Joe Biden are the same on that accord, right? So I don't understand what happened. I really don't. But now we're getting into Russia and Ukraine. And I agree, RFK's position on Russia and Ukraine, I think he totally gets that and he understands that. I saw him in person talk about that publicly. However, this particular position here about Israel, he does not get it. And he has said some things about Palestinian people that is very cringe, which Kim has rightfully so called out a number of times on her show and on my show. So I don't know what's happening. We're going a little bit more here.
Or in particular, he's open to having conversations with world leaders. I think he would bring in other world leaders and have conversations about Israel-Palestine. So he's at least a step further than Joe Biden in wanting to have these conversations, wanting to open up the door to talks with Iran, with Russia, with China. That if you get those guys in the room, they're not going to say it's okay to commit this genocide. Those world leaders are going to sit them down and look them in the face and say, you realize your country is aiding and abetting a genocide that's happening.
But those countries.
But people have already told him that already. Like, that's the thing. People have said that to RFK's face already. And I don't get this. RFK Jr. has not been willing to have conversations with people, particularly to the left of him, on Israel and Gaza. He said he would have a conversation with Max Blumenthal. He never had that conversation with Max Blumenthal. That made him look bad because you said that publicly. That never happened. I've never seen RFK Jr. have this conversation with Katie Halper. He seems to avoid Jewish people that do not share his same view of Zionism and don't support Zionism. He seems to avoid those people. So to me, I just don't understand why Kim thinks now all of a sudden that, oh no, he'll be okay about this and he'll actually be all right about it, when she herself has criticized a number of things that he has said. And for him to say that Palestinians are pampered people, I don't know where this is coming from all of a sudden. But one thing about this conversation is that it shows you what is happening now that we're getting closer to November. And you're going to see more of this happen. Let's go forward.
Already don't want, to the extent that they don't want there to be a genocide, what's preventing them from stopping the genocide is U.S. diplomatic cover at the United Nations, America's choice to continue its aid to Israel, regardless of whether or not it cherry picks this one weapon to not send over there, to continuously thwart ceasefire resolutions when they finally do pass the UN by doing this whole fiction of a ceasefire deal that Netanyahu agrees with, right? This is what Sam Husseini has been really pushing, that by saying, oh, no, we've got a ceasefire deal now, the United States intervened and distracted from countries fulfilling the UN's obligation, their obligations under the UN to actually stop to have a ceasefire. So all that being said, at the end of the day, it's America. And you can say, well, I'm willing to sit down with people. And this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, Kim, I got to say. There is a certain cohort of like the independent right-leaning crowd that really do use this idea that like, I'm willing to have a conversation. I'm open to sit down with the people who disagree with me. I'm willing to do a free speech, as though that is in of itself the decision-making that we want to see, or the moral shift that we want to see, or the political shift that we want to see, when it's just a cover for their unwillingness to do anything other than what the Republican establishment blob has been pushing on this foreign policy issue, and the Democratic establishment blob, to be clear, on Israel since time immemorial.
Well, you have to have the conversation first. I mean, you got to start there, so at least, right? So that does have to happen. But then you're right; it has to be actually followed up with policy. So
what confidence do you have? What evidence do you have, or why do you have any confidence that RFK Jr. isn't just using this as a kind of rhetorical shield to say, sure, I'm willing to talk
Right.
about it. When everything in terms of who he's surrounded himself with, he's brought in Rabbi Shmuley. He pushed out his old campaign manager, Dennis Kucinich, who's very principled on this issue.
Right.
Right. You know, aren't his actions demonstrating, and in addition to his Islamophobic anti-Arab rhetoric, that he is very clear on how he would continue to litigate the conflict in the region.
I think that the point that he has in his favor that Joe Biden doesn't have is that he is, when it comes to other conflicts, I think his position is better. His position is more in line actually with Trump when it comes to Russia and Ukraine and understanding the background of that conflict, understanding how we
Okay, and we're going to go to the next part in just a second, because what it seems like what Kim is doing here is now it's okay to just put his rhetoric and his opinion about Israel and Gaza. Now it seems like it's okay to just push that to the side and just focus on the fact that he's more understanding about the other foreign policy conflicts. But that is not what was said literally just a month ago. Like, these are recent. That's what I understand. These were recent statements. So I don't know what is going on here. That being said, it's not like RFK Jr. is the only person that you can vote for. So why would you, particularly Kim has come onto the show and she talked about what she saw when she was in the West Bank. She talked about the apartheid. She talked about the system. She was heavily against this. And I'll show you what she said before. This was not that long ago. This was not that long ago. So it seems like to me, and we'll go to the next part, and I think I'll tell you what's happening. Because it seems like to me that as we get closer to November, I think that more people are going to start to move. Some of the people that said they're not going to support Biden or Trump or whatever person, I think as we get closer, they are going to change their mind. And I think this happens with any other election. But I sincerely wonder if the reason why Kim is saying this is really more so because of RFK's position about the pandemic. And if you are a single issue voter, maybe that one is very important to you. But what is weird is that the Israel-Gaza issue is also very important to Kim. So I don't understand why now it's okay to forego that when you have said that that is a no, that's a red line for you. So let's go forward here. It gets a little bit heated where Brie will start to bring up other options. Listen to this, and I want you guys to think about what we need to do going forward.
But if I had to choose between the two on that one issue of Israel, I would gamble on Kennedy more than I would on Trump, because I've already seen Trump's record. I already saw him move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I already saw him legalize the illegal settlements in the West Bank. He legitimized those illegal settlements. I already saw him legitimize the annexing of the Golan Heights, Syrian territory, to Israel. I've already seen him.
Why is that the choice? Why is it? Why are you framing it between?
The choice, well, because it is. I mean, if it weren't, Jill Stein is my preferred candidate, and I would like everybody to like Jill Stein.
Now, this comes into what I've said every election, is that oftentimes I see people vote against their own interests. Kim just told you that Jill Stein is her preferred candidate, and that's who she would like to see vote. But watch what she says after this.
The reality of the situation at this point is she's not growing enough in the polls for her to actually be a viable candidate. I mean,
so now Kim is telling you that basically it sounds like to me that Kim doesn't want to support Jill Stein now because of her polling numbers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I vote for someone, I'm not voting for them based on the polls. I'm voting for them based on their policies. I'm voting for them based on their platform. If we are only going out to support people based on where they are in the polls, whether or not they have high polls, what are we doing? This goes back to what I've said multiple times before. A lot of times people are just supporting personalities. They're not even really supporting policies or platforms. It's important that we support the policies and the platforms. I don't really care who you vote for, but this particular switch to me just seems a little bit weird after what was just said recently. So I just don't. What are we doing?
Any of us can continue talking about her.
Kim, I think that talking like that is precisely the problem. There's this collective like fear of failure. That's like, I call it a kind of loser syndrome that developed after Bernie's losses on the left, where people are unwilling to, I think it's infinitely more brave and infinitely harder to say that people should vote for the candidate they actually believe in, especially in the shadow of a genocide, than to just say, well, yeah, this guy's polling the most. We can all see that RFK Jr. is polling the most.
Right.
But first of all, he's not going to win either. So why would we telegraph to ostensibly the most left party, the Democratic Party, that what it needs to do is move more toward RFK Jr. as opposed to move more toward our Jill Stein if they want our votes back, if they ever want a chance of winning again, right?
Let's pause here for a second. So the point that Brie makes here, I think, is a valid point. If you're saying you're not going to vote for Jill Stein because of where she's polling and she's not going to be a viable threat, but you're going to vote for RFK Jr. because he's polling higher, but then you admit that you know that he's not going to win either, then why not just vote for the people that have the principles that you believe in? Does this all make any sense to anybody? You guys see what I'm saying? Like, if you know that RFK Jr. is not going to win, if you know that Jill Stein is not going to win, if you know that Cornel West is not going to win, if you know that, then why not just vote for the people based on the platform that you most agree with instead of just voting for someone that has the higher polling? Let's continue.
I'm not saying that that's why we're voting for Jill Stein or that's the ultimate goal, but to the extent that that might be an effect, isn't that what we want to be telegraphing?
Well, sure. She's not a Democrat, though, so they're not going to care or listen, right? She's running on the Green Party ticket, so they're not.
RFK Jr.
Well, but he was,
he's an independent.
But no, he's a Democrat. I mean, he's running as an independent. No, he's a Democrat. He's totally a Democrat. He's running.
Yes, RFK Jr. is totally a Democrat. So if you're saying that RFK Jr. is totally a Democrat, you're really not breaking the duopoly because RFK Jr. is a Democrat. That is exactly what he is. I don't want someone put it this way, peep this, fam. When I say like we need a third party movement, when I say we need to vote outside the duopoly, that doesn't mean I want anyone. That doesn't mean that, it's like someone saying that they're running out of time. Someone says that, I'm getting older and I want to get married and settle down and have kids. That don't mean you take the first dude that walks down the street. I mean, he's got to have some principles. And I'm sure there are certain qualifications that you want him to have. So that's the same way I look at candidates. That don't mean I'll pick any third independent candidate that's running just because. You got to have the platform. You got to have the policies. There has to be some meat there. I don't want just no mayo.
As an independent because the Democratic Party pushed him out. Otherwise, he'd be a Democrat. I mean, I talked to him about this extensively. I mean, I will take the credit. I'm going to take the credit. I do think that the reason why he became an independent was because I pressed him on it. I mean, everybody was like, finally, somebody told him, why the hell are you running as a Democrat? They're never going to let you in the debates. They're never going to let you on the ticket. It's just not going to happen, buddy. You should run as an independent. He sat there and said, I can't believe you're telling me this. I'm a Democrat. I want to bring the Democratic Party back to the days of Kennedy Democrats. He's so, just like Dennis Kucinich, so thoroughly a Democrat. They cannot break themselves away, really. Strategically, he's running as an independent.
But the point you're making isn't an ideological one, right? The point is that, well, Jill Stein's not a Democrat, so she's not going to be listened to by the Democratic Party. Jill Stein's not a Democrat, so they're not going to care about, she's not going to have any influence or she's not going to be able to win. Well, for those reasons, Jill Stein and RFK Jr. are in the same place because RFK Jr. is who he is and has the beliefs that he believes and has been, I don't mean this judgmentally, but courting the audience that he's been courting. The Democratic Party loathes him, is not going to listen to him, and is not going to have any takeaways from his success other than they already, Kennedy aside, are eager to move right on a number of issues because that's where they think the electorate is. And more importantly, actually, that's where they know their donor base is. So I'm just confused about this. That's not my concern. Like to the extent that like there's resistance to the Democratic Party to change. That is true regardless on the basis of like the political affiliations of RFK Jr. and Jill Stein respectively. What I'm more concerned with is the directionality of the influence that they have.
But what?
Let me pause for a second. This is an excellent point, Casey. Thank you so much because you just nailed this home. Casey said, I have to still want to have sex with you. Yes, you can't just take anything. And I feel that way about candidates. Like, I can't just take anything. Like, no, there has to be strong policy there. There has to be. When I say I'm looking for a third party movement, I'm looking for a movement. I want a foundation there. I want something that is stable, something that we can build on. Typical to a relationship, right? So you want something you can build on. The reality is, after this is all said and done, because RFK Jr. is run as an independent, there's nothing there left. There's nothing left. This is one of the things why I do argue more for the third party over the independent candidates, although you could do both or whatever you want. But with the third party, I said before, we need to build up these third parties, whether it's PSL, whether it's Green Party, etc. We need to build on the foundation that is already there. When the people that are running as independents, after they're done, there's nothing left there. That's the problem. So that's why you don't get a movement after that's said and done. Let's go on a little bit more.
Did the Democratic Party change at all after Bernie? I mean, was there any
changes there were changes to the platform for sure. But I mean, to be clear, I want to build a third party. That's why another reason why I think it's so much more important to support Jill Stein or even Jill Stein over Cornel West, who I respect so greatly, because my interest is not in the candidate, but in actually building a party structure, getting them $20 million of federal funding that they can get if they hit 5% of the vote, by voting for someone who actually stands for what I believe in and can start building a party infrastructure and continue to build a party infrastructure across the country that can elect people all the way down ballot.
I think if your primary concern or goal is a third party, then you'd vote Kennedy. You'd have to. That's the only person who's actually going to break the duopoly. Don't Stein's not going to break that duopoly.
My primary concern.
But he is still a part of the So this, RFK Jr. is not anti-establishment. RFK Jr. is establishment. RFK Jr. is in bed with billionaire investors. RFK Jr. is having fundraisers with billionaires. He is the establishment. He's not separate from these people. And I know that Kim knows that. That's one thing. The other thing, again, how can, after everything that's been said, how can you now all of a sudden just gloss over the things that he said about Palestinian people and said, give Israel everything that they need? Yes, he is a freaking Zionist and you are against Zionism. So now it's okay to vote for Zionism because you're like, he's polling higher and he can break the duopoly? No, we can't accept every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's thrown in our face just because they can do one thing. We can't. And I'm going to show you with the numbers with the states who's actually more of a threat right now when it comes to ballot access, which RFK Jr. doesn't have much of. I don't know. Look, I got it. Kim, come back to the light. Come to the light, Kim. Come to the light. You guys remember the movie Poltergeist? Remember Poltergeist? Go to the light, Carolyn. Come to the light, Carolyn. Come back, Kim. What is happening?
Isn't voting a third party. I don't want to vote for a genocidal maniac.
No, right. But you want to break a duopoly, right? You want to break the duopoly. Well, the only person who's really got a viable shot at breaking that duopoly at this point is Kennedy. Jill Stein doesn't have that.
He doesn't have a party.
He doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter.
He doesn't have a party.
You don't have to have a party.
It does matter. You have to build a party to have a permanent impact on whether or not you actually are able to have.
He could later,
like Bernie Sanders,
like Bernie Sanders should have done, like Bernie should have done.
But my point is that these candidates, they run these candidacies. They clearly have no interest in party development or doing anything outside of themselves. Haven't we learned that lesson already? And shouldn't we be invested in a party infrastructure over? It's not about Jill Stein as a human being, who I happen to like a great deal and respect a great deal. But it's about the party. At what point are we going to learn this lesson and
the
stop
Green Party's
investing
not
in
it.
these heroic? Why not?
Because it's just it's too one-sided. I mean, in order to build, it's too far left.
Pause. So Kim's saying that Jill Stein, not Jill Stein, but the Green Party is too far left. But Kim Iversen was a part of the Bernie Sanders movement, which was also left. Like, Bernie Sanders had thousands of people at his rally. When I saw him here in Boston at Boston Common, there were over 10,000 people at Bernie Sanders' rally. Joe Biden never put up those numbers when he came here. I think he maybe had 100 people? Bernie Sanders traveled all across this country and got thousands of people to come out and energize over left policies. So I don't understand how this framing of the Green Party is too far, it's too far left, that's going to turn people off. Bernie Sanders ran on core economic class-based issues to help the American people, which was still left because he's a social democrat. And he got a lot of people enthusiastic and wound up about it and said, yes, we do deserve more. So I don't understand why now all of a sudden it's a problem because it's too far left. I don't get it. What is happening here?
I mean, the Green Party is just never going to attract on many issues. Practically all of them. Jill Stein is not, though. Jill Stein as a candidate is actually quite populist. Jill Stein is incredibly populist as a candidate. And she disagrees with her party all the time because the party has, very leftist positions that is just, they're not going to attract the populist middle.
Jill Stein's platform is to the left of the Green Party. Jill Stein's platform, if you look at it, is to the left of the Green Party. What is happening here? Kim, come back to the light.
There's disagreements within the Republican Party. There's disagreements within the Democratic Party. Most of the Republican Party thinks that you should give every last dollar in every American's bank account to Ukraine and litigate the war to the very end. Most of the Republican Party believes in a whole bunch of things that are not part of the populist wing that independents want to pretend that the Republican Party really is. The Republican Party isn't, Massey and Ron Paul. That's just a fringe component. The same way that there's a lot of diversity within the Democratic Party. The point is, though, that on a very basic level, the Green Party adopts all of the populist frameworks that we say that we care about as people who formally supported Bernie Sanders, right? Really basic bedrock issues like Medicare for all, which 69% of voters of Americans still wanting to have these greater labor protections, wanting the environment not to burn up into a crisp. I mean, it's not like a rocket science issue, right? This isn't a close one in terms of which one of these parties, and I say that again, understanding that RFK Jr. doesn't have a party, which one of these parties actually represents the interests of most Americans.
The Green Party doesn't. I mean, it would be way more popular if it did. If anything, the Libertarian Party has a better shot at breaking through, in the existing parties that are out there that are already kind of growing and popular. The Libertarian Party has a greater shot at becoming that third party potential. I mean, but they've got their own ideological problems that people are uncomfortable with. The fact.
I will my favorite planet. I will, because I'm just like, what happened? What happened to you? Seriously. So she's saying the Libertarian Party is more popular. It's interesting. I don't see it that way. They have more ballot access, but it's not every day I meet a libertarian.
That what is the ideology other than no government for anything?
They don't want a government, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So but that allows a lot of room for a lot of different ideas. That's why you have a Chase Oliver, for example, who's now the nominee for the Libertarian Party. I get it. There's a lot of strife there, but Chase Oliver is somebody who comes from the Democratic side. He's a leftist libertarian, and the libertarians have accepted him. So as the Libertarian Party actually has more room for people to be left and right.
I don't think he's a leftist libertarian. I don't.
We're going to pause it there because I do want to get to what happened before this interview and why I'm a little bit confused, because I don't understand what happened to Kim. Just recently. So let's look at the ballot access. When she talks about the threat here right now, as it stands, Jill Stein has more ballot access than RFK Jr. Now, I know he's still working on it, and so is the Green Party, but Jill Stein is on the ballot in over 22 states right now. She's damn near probably sure to get over 40, just like she did when she ran in 2016. RFK Jr., what's interesting, when I went to his website to look at his ballot access, it shows you the states where they've gathered signatures, but it doesn't show you the states where they had ballot access, where they're actually on the ballot. I had difficulty finding that, but I did find it in this article here. So I want to mention this as well. So it says he has gained ballot access in Utah, Michigan, California, Delaware, Oklahoma, Hawaii, and Texas. Officially gained access. So that's 7 states. So if we look at the ballot access issue right now, Jill Stein has more ballot access than RFK Jr. does. It's just a numbers thing. It's not me, trying to play favorites here, just looking at math. So there's that. Now, the other thing that I want to show you is what Kim said when she was on my show. I think this was just 3 months ago. And I'm going to show you what she said to Jill Stein just recently. Someone explain.
On the state, really joining a ticket together. So I've been vocal about this, not only on Twitter, but on my show, much to the chagrin of the people that love RFK Jr. They're still very committed to his campaign, not really willing to criticize him. I've kind of given up on him since the Israel stuff. I don't understand his stance and his support for Israel, but whatever.
What? Who got to Kim? This interview was 3 months ago. This was April 1st. Okay, I know you guys say, oh, that was 3 months ago. A lot can happen within 3 months. People can change their mind. But then, just recently, you got to see what she said to Jill Stein. And this was on Kim's show. And I was like, I remember I applauded her for this on Twitter. I was like, hell yeah, Kim, I'm really proud of you. So just recently,
it's really frustrating. This is the moment. And if these other candidates cannot, they're unable, they're unwilling. And that to me is absolutely 100% a deal breaker, which is why I intend to vote for you this coming fall. You are the person that I am going to be voting for. And I know a lot of people who are with me on that feel like this is a red line and that you are the only option out there right now. And also, and I swore on, and this is how much of a red line it is for me. I swore off the Green Party. I swore off the Green Party after the vaccine, after they came out so hard about the vaccine mandates, saying that they wanted mandates and they were really crazy about that. But I know you were against the mandates, which is what makes me feel comfortable. And so I will go against even what I said about the Green Party, and I will vote for you this fall because I am that to me it's a red line. How can?
Okay, so she told, this is the Jill interview for people who are wondering. That's the Jill interview where she told Jill Stein that she was going to vote for her. And apparently, I see Kim is in the chat. Kim has told me, she said at the end of the interview, you guys can't see it, but I can. She said, at the end of the interview, I said, I'm voting for Jill. I haven't gotten to that part yet, Kim. But she did say that she is going to vote for Jill. But what I'm worried about is the fact that this whole thing about getting behind, people should get behind RFK Jr. to break the duopoly, at what cost? And that's the thing that really bothers me. So I want to show you something that just happened recently as well when we go into the polls. Hold on. Now, this is the CNN poll. CNN post-debate poll among independents. So this is the part I think is really important. It says that Trump has 44%, Biden has 34%. That's when it's just Donald Trump and Biden. Then it goes further when they add the other candidates in. Something did happen after the debate because it shows Trump at 30%, Biden at 24%, Kennedy at 24%. So RFK went up, which is what I did predict would happen. But also Jill Stein went up to 6%. I think that's the highest she's been in the polls so far. Cornel West is up 3%, and that's Chase Oliver there, which is at 2%. So it looks like Jill and Kennedy did get a bump. after the debate. And then this also happened. Dr. Jill Stein has been informed by the FEC that her presidential campaign has qualified for federal matching funds. So this is huge. Dr. Jill Stein is seeking the Green Party presidential nomination, which will take place, Saturday, August 17th. And it says how you can read about the advisory convention there. Achieving presidential primary public matching funds is critical for Green candidates to achieve ballot access state by state across the U.S. And there's a link here that says read here so you can understand why. And that's actually a retweet from the FEC because the FEC did announce this as well, which is a good thing. The FEC declared Jill Stein and her principal campaign committee eligible, to receive public matching funds for her 2024 presidential campaign for the Green Party nomination. Guys, that is huge. And again, as I said before, that was the goal, is to get those matching funds. So this is money that they can get next time. They don't have to worry about like trying to, how can we get this and get that? That's the thing about having a third party versus just an independent candidate. Because the reality is, like, what happens after November to RFK Jr.'s campaign? When you run as an independent, there's nowhere to send that to unless he starts his own third party. I don't know. But I just think that's a big win for Jill Stein's campaign to get those matching funds. And I told you guys before, yes, I have many criticisms of the Green Party, which I've said to Green Party members on this show, things that need to be improved and I think could be better. But at the end of the day, it seems like to me, as we get closer and closer to November, people are going to start to change and move a little bit. And I can see that RFK has already risen in the polls. I told you recently that RFK gave an offer to Joe Biden, or extended an offer to take Joe Biden's place, let Joe Biden step down and let RFK take that spot. I don't think Joe Biden's going to entertain that, but he made that offer. Marianne Williamson, I think, just released another statement saying that she would be willing to do the same thing. Everything is happening right now, but I think at the end of the day, it's still going to be a nail biter. But I don't think that we should break the duopoly under RFK Jr. because I don't think that RFK Jr. really stands for anything. I think that RFK Jr. is establishment. I don't believe that he's anti-war. I think this is a fucking joke. I think he's very much embedded in the system that he claims to be against. That's my take on that. We will have call-in after show tonight, ladies and gentlemen, right after the show. I'm going to take a quick break. Eric, when you come on, you can do the poll. I think we still have to announce the poll, which I think that poll is pretty close. And then I think we also still have some super chats.
All right, here we go. All right. How's everybody doing on this Tuesday night on our big Tuesday show? We covered a lot. So I am Eric T. Red. I'm usually in the background, but I come to the foreground here once in a while to give Sabby a little break before we jump over into the Zoom hangout, kind of our after show where you get to participate. We like to hear from you. We like to hear from lots of people. We'll be posting that link. Sabby, actually, while she's out on the break, she actually sets up the Zoom room, and we get the link set up, and we and we'll take it from there. But first, let's look at, we got a good mess of super chats from this last story. Let's check those out. This one from our good friend JB Font, saying the desperation will drastically increase. I think talking about how the whole situation and everything's going here. I mean, I do feel like we're this is a unique moment where, I mean, who would have thought all these things that are happening, and when you get crazy times, anything can happen. So that's why, I think while the idea of a Stein actually getting elected, or Green Party becoming a big thing, seems unimaginable. I mean, how many unimaginable things have happened already? So, I mean, I do feel like it's turning into one of these anything is possible type moments. So Thanks for the super chat from Democracy. Many of the Green Party is Dem light. It was authoritarian on COVID 1984 and have a similar position on Ukraine as Vaush on Ukraine. Yeah, I mean, the Green Party is I think a very different beast, animal, whatever you want to call it now than it was several years ago. One of the things that happens with any party is that when you have a strong candidate that comes in and becomes the presumptive nominee, they essentially take over the party, and essentially their platform and their views essentially become the party's views. And I think we've already seen that happen very much with Green Party. I think Jill has made it pretty clear that, she was against the mandates and was unhappy with how those decisions came down. And I think it would be a very different Green Party under Jill is the main thing. I think it already is. Thanks for the super chat, baby Ethernet. Kim showing PMC privilege and no stakes in this fight. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, baby Ethernet. Rick Solis said, Sabby, quote, I pick my candidates like I pick my potato salad very carefully. There you go. Yes, I think that's a good policy. And thanks for the super chat, baby Ethernet as well. But why would RFK build a party, Kim? Laughable. Yeah, it's, I just always remember when our RFK first announced, and it was the big thing. He's a Kennedy Democrat. And I still think he's a Kennedy Democrat. They just won't let him. Be Easy Dude said, Sabby Sabs, he's sipping the RFK bourbon. Yes. We'll probably hear more from Be Easy in the Zoom hangout that's coming up soon. Thanks for the super chat, Yadira. Kim is not a lefty. She never was. She's a libertarian. Yeah, it's probably about right. And thanks for the super chat, Brandon. Is Tulsi Iversen wrong to say? Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. And thanks for the super chat. Thanks for that one. Thanks for this one, Roger Meadows. Kim is not an EC voter and cannot swing state. Why panic? Oh, so why panic? All right. Meaning why panic about what Kim's doing? Yeah, it's an interesting question. How much influence does she have? It's a good question. Thank you for this super chat, Money Making Bear. RFK Jr. can't go against Israel or he will lose his life. His platform is on stopping corporate corruption. You need a mix of voters to win. Yeah, I mean, I just see RFK Jr. as just being corrupt like the Dems and the Republicans are. And just, a lot of what happens in the system is you have different sets of billionaire interests, these top 0.1 percenters, and they're not all the same. You have different ones. You have energy, you have Silicon Valley, you have the war machine, and you have this kind of tussling and infighting. And I think sometimes, that's what you see with these things is sometimes one group pushes one way and one group pushes the other way. But the main thing they always agree on is to keep the game going financially, to keep the wealth extraction going from our money and resources up to them. And that's why things, in terms of the economics of the system, always stay the same. That's the thing, in my opinion, we have to recognize and really demand an end to this whole dirty, corrupt political economic system. And the first step in that is recognizing it for what it is. Thanks for the super chat, Janice. Voting RFK is not breaking the duopoly. There are 0 affiliates running down ticket like a third party has. It is strategically unsound to vote for him for that reason, aside from his psychotic views on the Middle East. I hear you, Janice. And thanks for this one, Goba44. I hope the Israel lobby hasn't threatened or paid Kim a visit. Love Kim and you, being Sabby. Thanks for that, Goba. Justin B says, rumors are out there that RFK might be seeking the Democratic Party nomination. That's not breaking the duopoly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of clear that if the Dems offered it to RFK, he would take it. I mean, and then, where's your big change there? And thanks for the super chat, Green Coalition. Precisely. Jill is why I joined, and her fanatics like me are being exalted quickly within the party, LOL. And also laughing at the Tulsi Iversen comment. Yes. Now, let's see. We got those taken up. Let me see if I can cue this poll up the right way. Sometimes we have to scroll and move things around. Uh-oh. I think we lost the poll. Oh, no. I think we lost the poll because we put in the after show part. All right, then. I guess we won't show the poll, but I usually can't have everything. We will try another poll later. But let's see. We were talking about there was a story earlier about the let me make sure I'm the right thing. There was a story earlier about the Supreme Court and the housing and allowing states to move people along. And one of the the obvious fix for that is to just build tons of quality public housing. But we know the reason that doesn't happen is because big money interests don't want that, because they see that rightly as a threat to their bottom line, the real estate interests, which is huge. And so, it's again tied up into the corrupt system that runs just on big donor money. And we're going to have to hit at the heart of that to really do something about it. I think the good news is that is possible, but it's going to need a movement. It's going to need a big movement. I think a campaign like Stein's campaign can be a significant part of that movement, but it's also going to have to be literally millions of people in the street demanding an end to this dirty, corrupt system. And that means, essentially replacing the Congress with Congress members, who just simply aren't corrupt and who call out the current ones as corrupt is part of it. It's possible to do, but it's going to take a big movement. We had one more super chat come in from Democracy. Are you worried that the reason the left is weak in the West because anyone who disagrees isn't left or is called conservative, no class solidarity? Thanks for that.
No, I'm worried that the left is weak, not because of class solidarity. We had class solidarity around Bernie Sanders. The left is weak because we're not organized and because we fell apart after the Bernie Sanders movement, because again, that organization happened through a political campaign. We don't have a mass movement across this country that is not attached to a political campaign. So imagine if Bernie Sanders would have continued that movement after he lost. Then we would really have something. But he didn't do that, and he didn't plan on doing that. But we are going to the after show. We all good on chats?
Yeah, I got bad news, though. We lost the poll.
Oh, because I pinned the... Oh, man. Okay, but I did look at it. I saw the poll said... I don't remember the numbers, but the majority said no. Wait, no. Do you agree with the Supreme? Yeah, the majority said no, and then after no, it was yes. I do remember that. Sorry, I forgot. When I click the thing, it does that. Oh, man. Okay.
Technical problem.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
I want this one.
All right. So we are going to go to the call-in show. And just to reiterate for those who are just joining, just to say this again, because that was not an attempt to smear Kim. As I said at the end, she did say she's going to support Jill. My just main concern is that a lot of people are going to hear this. That's our way to break like the duopoly. And then they're going to feel like they have to vote for RFK just to break the duopoly, which I don't think is what you should be doing. I think you should be voting based on the principles that you believe in and your positions, not just breaking the duopoly just because. That's my whole take. Okay, we are going to do that. Let me go ahead and open the room. Okay, and then let's go to the banner because I do want to enter passcode. Okay, I see people are already coming into the room. Let me go ahead and move this here and then just move myself. And you guys know how we do this on Zoom. If you want to speak, you have to raise your hand. And the way that you do that is if you click on reactions at the bottom, there's an option to raise your hand. So that's how you do that. And then I'll go ahead and put the pass. I guess people don't need the passcode. I see people getting in. I usually put the passcode up on the screen. Let me just check. But I guess they haven't been really asking for that, which is interesting. But if you need it, 1 2 2 2 5 2 3. Save. Okay, if you need it, the passcode is 151523 to get in. But I think everybody seems to be getting in just fine. It's always interesting how that happens because it says that it requires it, but it doesn't. I don't know. Anywho, that's how you get in. And I see people already in the chat.
Rumble.
You're adding it to Rumble? Okay. Because I can't put,
Because we want you from Rumble too. We want everybody.
And I still don't know how to put a poll on Rumble, you guys. I still have reached out to people about that, and I haven't figured that out.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're good to go into the Zoom Hangout. If you want to pass that host thing to me, I can be muting people too.
Okay. If you just raise your hand, Eric, so you move up
yeah.
to the top. Yeah. That way I can find you easier on here.
All right, raising hand. I'll say for other people too. You go reactions and raised hand. Try and remember to mute yourself.
Okay.
We'll stay you in there.
Okay, I have made Eric the host. When you enter the room, go ahead and mute yourself. We'll go ahead and get started. All right, guys, that's it. I'm out here. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.